Schmidt and Assistant Fire Chief Lawrence.
Anybody turn on their microphones, please? So we have agenda on the back table there. So everything we're going through tonight will be in that packet. There'll be a hard copy there if anyone wants to see what we're discussing. We do have time allotted for floor items. If you wish to speak to a floor item, please come to the podium, introduce yourself, give us your address, and then we'll give you 3 minutes to say your piece. But welcome to our meeting. This is regular council meeting for the city of Nowthen, July 13th, 2021, and it is 7:04 p.m. We'd like to take a motion to approve or amend tonight's agenda. I would like to amend, I would like to add for the good of the council, approval to go to the mayor's conference in September. Anything else amended on the agenda for tonight?
Mr. Mayor,
Councilmember
the
Blake.
RCA on the city financial newsletter, I just would like a little more discussion on that.
Okay.
And explanation of what we're doing and why we're doing it and how we're doing it.
Okay. So you can put that down for an item 6. Or you want to discuss it there at the consent
That's
agenda?
great.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilmember Rainville.
if there are no additional changes to the agenda, I move it as amended.
A second.
A motion and a second. Any other discussion? Seeing and hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. Those not wanting it, signify by saying aye. Motion carries. We'll move forward. So, before we have the consent agenda here, approval of city council meetings minutes from May 2021, approval of the treasurer's report and claims dated June 2nd, 2021 through July 6th, 2021, the quarterly financial report, RCA for Lakeside Cabinet use of golf carts and temporary road closure, September 25th, replacement of refrigerator and tables in Nowthen Memorial Park Pavilion, and engineer's memo on name brand storage, and that would be releasing their escrow, it is. So I have a motion to approve the consent agenda.
We just did
Yeah,
that.
I just moved.
All right. All those in favor?
We already did that.
We did the agenda. We didn't do the consent items.
That's true. That was
That was the
yeah.
agenda. So do we have a motion to approve the consent agenda with item F being removed for further discussion?
I make a motion to approve the consent agenda with item F being removed and putting down to item 6.
All right, do we have a second?
I'll second it.
Motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Do we have any floor items tonight? Seeing and hearing none, we'll continue on with the sheriff's report.
Well, good evening, everyone. Some of you may not recognize me. Not in uniform tonight. I was in meetings all day and thought that, you know what, I'm going to dress a little more comfortably for sitting around a table all day. So, hence the plain clothes. So, just a couple of things I wanted to mention this month. The calls for service did go out. I saw that. And in the city this month, we did respond to 131 calls for service. A couple of things had come up. I'd spoken with the mayor earlier today. We are seeing an increase in some calls. Nothing really criminal related, but sometimes we're seeing an increase in things like alarm calls and some other types of calls. From time to time, we get residences within the city that end up needing more enforcement or more calls for service just based on some of the activity that happens there. It's not necessarily always criminal, but sometimes we just get called to respond to different complaints that the citizens might have or to mediate different issues and things like that. One of the things I wanted to point out is one of the call categories that we have seen an increase in the last, especially this year, is alarm calls. And one of the things that I brought up to the mayor that some cities do, and I'm not certain this is a direction the council would want to go, but I want to make it at least an option because the question has been raised, is some cities set a specific number of false alarm type calls to a resident for something like a burglar alarm. And then after that number of calls is reached during a calendar year or whatever specific time that city sets, after that the city either warns them, gives them a final warning, or then does charge them some fee that is set by the council for that false alarm. I'm just bringing that up as a potential option, but I also shared with the mayor, I think that some type of educational campaign, whether it's through the city's newsletter or on the city's website, maybe explaining to the citizenry what the problem is, and maybe some of the folks will be able to police themselves. Generally, when it comes to things like alarms that are tripped, usually it's something like, I leave my house and I forget to tell my neighbor who's coming over to do something that I set my alarm and they come in and trip it, or they have a faulty system where there's something wrong with their system that it trips on its own, or things like a ceiling fan being left on in a room where there's motion detectors can rustle a piece of paper that's on a desk and that does it. So there's a whole bunch of reasons for these things to happen. But unfortunately, that's a call for service we're seeing rise that the city may be able to step in and try to do something about. There's a lot of other calls for service we're not going to be able to take that stance on. You know, if somebody calls about a dispute with somebody else, it's pretty tough to say, well, we're going to charge you after so many calls to your residence. But on something like the alarms, that is something I've seen other cities do. So I just wanted to bring that up. Just for the council's information, I've been working with Councilmember Rainville and regarding the upcoming Heritage Festival and getting things moving for that and having a presence from the Sheriff's Office there. Also, Sheriff Stewart and I will be at the August 5th City Council workshop to discuss the potential 2022 contract for law enforcement. So if the council has any questions that they'd like answered or some things to explore, that would be a really good time to bring that up. You'll have Sheriff Stewart and myself, and he's much smarter than I am, so you might have get some better answers to what you guys normally do for me. But we'll be there to answer the council's questions, and if we don't have an answer for you there, we'll find you one. And just the last thing I wanted to do tonight is update the council on Bar None. On June 30th, I went to a meeting at Bar None. The mayor was there, as well as City Attorney Rupi. And it was supposed to be a community notification meeting, kind of letting the citizens know about programming and the history of Bar None. I didn't recall seeing any citizens there. It was mostly members of other social service agencies and stuff, I think, that have an interest in Bar None, where they send kids there. What I would say is I think it was a good meeting from the standpoint of I was able to reinforce issues that we're having in light of a lot of the things that they have going on there, asking about the programming and talking about the issues we're having. And Mayor Palan, as well as City Attorney Rupi, were able to point out that, and I think this was a little bit of a shock to some of the leadership at Bar None and Volunteers of America, that not only, you know, while they're walking through their issues with the Department of Human Services, they also have issues that they need to walk through with the city regarding what's being undertaken, the different services that are being offered, and any changes to the use at Bar None need to be approved by the city. And Mayor, if you'd like to comment, I just felt that was an eye-opening thing for the leadership from Volunteers of America.
Yeah, they continue to say they've been working with the city on things, and I've never known them to work with you on anything or with the council on anything, so they didn't identify how they thought they were working with the city, and so we did reiterate that if they've been working with Liz on possible permitting, that's a completely different thing, and Attorney Rupi was very clear. Not only did they not have permits to have the school, but when they introduced this new program and they brought that into town without saying anything to the city, that wasn't a permitted use either. So I think it kind of surprised them because they were doing this as more of a social call, and when it was brought to their attention that you're jeopardizing your whole operation here if you don't get it straightened out. There is actually a follow-up. They sent an email out, and they would like to meet with Linda and I as a follow-up. And so Andrea and Faye and Deborah, I think it is, all want to have a follow-up meeting August 19th is what they're proposing.
Is that what it is?
That's what they're proposing. I'll talk to you afterwards. So, but at this point, it seems like we're spinning our wheels until we get DHS and VOA and the city and the sheriff's department all in the same room at the same time, because they're continuing to say things that we hear one thing from DHS and they're saying something completely different. And because we're not all in the same room at the same time, it's not going to get resolved.
And I don't think, Mr. Mayor, I don't believe we'll be able to make any headway until they get some resolution with their Department of Human Services issues, because right now they're contesting the violations that they received. So my personal opinion would be to possibly wait and see how that moves along before we get involved and try to set a path, because we don't know if any conditions that might kick in based on that would change the direction and we're going to go. And the other piece I would like to suggest is possibly if the fire department is interested, because we did bring up the delay in the locking of the doors and things like that. And that one of the first things they brought up was having an issue with the fire department. And you were able to quell that, but it might be good to have them there to be able to speak on that.
I think the other thing, and it came up at our last meeting, is they were proud of the fact that they had made an individual arrangement with Alina to use non-emergency personnel, so they didn't have to call the sheriff all the time. And when we brought up the fact that they still could be tying up emergency response equipment, because Alina is going to not necessarily declare an emergency, but if they've got an ambulance available, they're going to use that ambulance, which is now no longer available to our communities. And they were unaware of that as well. So they appeared to be rushing into some what looked like easy answers, and we came back with challenging questions. So, but I do think until we get all in the same room at the same time, it's and sit down until we're done. I think it's, this is more. I really do think this was more. It was, and again, this invite was sent out to the whole council and staff. But I think from what I saw there, it was really for these other social service agencies to get the tour, and I'm not sure they wanted them to sit through our presentation necessarily.
No, unfortunately, the other folks there got to hear all of the issues in the dirty laundry, but it is what it is. And it did need to be reinforced, because as I mentioned when we were there, the newest director there said, this is the path, we want to work with you, we want to make this better, we want to be a good steward for the city or something to that effect. And I just said, while I greatly appreciate that, I've heard that same exact statement time after time after time. So what will impress me and what will continue to move this forward are actions, not just words.
And they were still at a loss when the sergeant asked, how are you gonna keep them from getting out on 47? You know, you get out on 47, then it becomes the sheriff's issue. And the question is, how do you keep that from happening? And it's become fairly sophisticated. They know how to cause a distraction here, and the door opens over here, so. They did indicate that they have a very inexperienced staff and very high turnover. So I think they have challenges. And the attorney basically said, you're not, the city isn't interested in going ahead with any permitting until you can show you've got things under control. Because opening up and sharing all these new programs that you're hoping to do and how you're at half capacity right now and hoping to get to full capacity isn't exciting us at all. You know, that's a great goal on your part, but right now that's not working for the city. So.
And I applaud the work they're trying to do, I truly do, but they have to have the facility and the staff and the programs to actually deal with the people that they're bringing into the facility. Because if they don't, then we're just going to continue on with this cycle. So I think it was a good meeting, but we still need to see some action moving forward. So with that said, that's all I had for this evening, unless the council has any questions.
And council members, anything for
Mr. Mayor? Mr. Mayor?
Councilmember Rainbow.
I have one comment in regards to the Sheriff's Office and the Heritage Festival. I really appreciate your participation in that. You've been with us for years, and it's always a exciting thing for people to see, and so I appreciate that. A question on the alarms. Are you able, if there's 50 alarms, I'm just pulling out a number, are you able to determine of those alarms, are they canceled before even being dispatched or before arrival, or it's just an alarm call that has come in?
The majority of them, if they're canceled before dispatch, we don't get a call for service. So
Okay.
if the call comes into our 911 center of this alarm, and then they get a call back before they get us dispatched, we don't ever know about it. But if there's a call that gets canceled, we would know about it, but generally those aren't in the reports that you
They're
see.
not in the calls for service. Okay, all right, thank you.
Anything else for the commander?
Mr. Mayor?
Mayor Stockman.
Yeah, question about VOA. You made a mention of not having everybody in the same room, but if not everyone is aware of these meetings that are going on, it's hard to be there. So I'm just wondering, somebody has to coordinate all this, and who do you want it to be? Because I don't think if the city does it, it's not gonna happen on its own.
And that was a question for the sheriff afterwards, because it does seem like we've talked to the VOA, we've talked to DHS, going back and forth, and they're not saying the same thing. One of the biggest issues is hands-on. DHS is saying, no, they're not limited. They're saying absolutely limited. And so I think what I would like to do is go through the courtesy call with Linda one more time, and then coordinate with city staff to say, here's all the principles. We need fire, we need law enforcement representing us in Oak Grove, and law enforcement representing St. Francis. And I think the reasonable thing is we need to have the placement agencies here, because Anoka County isn't placing anybody out there. It's Ramsey, it's Hennepin, and they need to come out and see what's going on as well, because it's a long way from downtown St. Paul and Minneapolis, and even Plymouth. Why are they not in Plymouth anymore? Why are they not operating this program in Plymouth anymore? Or Minnetonka, I mean, sorry. So I think that it needs to be a group the size of what we intended to have years ago at the Anoka County. And probably at a neutral site like that, to take it into Anoka County, because as they said, we're not placing people there, but we'll certainly host it. And I would coordinate that with Anoka County and all the vested parties through the city staff. So,
Mayor, I would disagree. I believe that staff should be involved. We weren't aware of another meeting, and we've been involved all the way up to this point. And if they're not communicating well, let's not set that precedence for us as well. There should be more than just the mayor meeting. I believe that Planner Stockman should be involved, the city office should be involved, so we stay consistent with the communication, because we're just hearing this for the first time tonight, that there was another meeting.
well, which, the August meeting?
The meeting that the commander is speaking of.
No, you were copied on that. You were invited, yeah.
June 30th?
I'd have to look, I know I got an invite, but we were out of town. So,
I was pretty sure it
No,
went
I
to everybody.
I didn't receive an invite for that.
I'll look and see.
Okay, well, we can check, but, yeah, I was surprised nobody showed up, but Linda would have been there, but she had other engagement. But yes, I agree that, we should coordinate and make sure that we're there. Like I said, I can go back, Andrea just sent out an email asking if she could follow up with Linda and I. If we want to broaden that out, we can certainly do that. I don't even know what it is they're looking at right now. They just want to know if we could meet on August deadline, so.
Mr. Mayor, yeah, I agree, we should probably get this to as many, I mean, the more we communicate with the staff and with people within our, around here, the better off we are with all being on the same page.
And I guess, Mr. Mayor, if I can speak to that, I think if we're going to do that, we should have almost a standing order if one of us gets an invite, because I think how this one even came up, this was a last minute, this meeting at Barn on the one I'm talking about, and I wasn't on the invitation list. It went to somebody else in our office, and they just happened to know that I've been dealing with it. Well, they know that I'm the one that's been dealing with this. This is not a mystery to them. So I don't know if it was an oversight or if it was intentional, but maybe that's a good plan, that if one of us gets an invite to something, that we just kindly respond to them that, look, to resolve this, we're gonna work as a team together. So if you're inviting me, you're inviting the city and that city staff and the fire department and the sheriff's office and council members that are also involved.
Mr. Mayor, maybe
Councilmember Blake.
if one of us got an invite, we should send it right to the staff and then they disperse it. Don't you think? Because you would know all the people to disperse it to.
I think one of the things we need to say is what's the invite to? Because again,
Don't want to waste anybody's time.
this one here, I thought was for the city and the sheriff's department, based on the invite. And then all these other people are there from other social service agencies, so I'm not exactly sure what they intended it for, but we got our chance to say what we wanted to make sure they heard. But so I think the first thing we have to do is say, what's the meeting for? And then decide, is it worth using council and staff time to attend it if it's just going to be more talk without everybody participating. So,
Mr. Mayor,
Councilmember Rainville.
I just forwarded the email to Lori, so she has the person's name that sent that out. I didn't look at the invitation list of who it was for because I knew I wasn't going to be there. So, but yeah, so Lori now has that and can follow up so that she at least can get on that email string if the woman is going to send out any additional.
Is she not on that one?
No, she is not. No.
I assume she was.
And the other ones, I know, I was looking, Councilmember Alders is not on it either, so I don't know.
Jason, where were you?
Or and I didn't know.
It's easy.
So, but, Councilmember.
I think we
Greenberg, the mayor,
need to make sure
Councilmember
that Jason's on the,
All of them.
I think it's on
Everybody.
the city website. Somebody was saying the other day they couldn't get,
Yeah,
they didn't see Jason on the
His
city
email's not on the
website.
website, so
He's on there.
his email is, it doesn't, when you click it, it doesn't click to anything.
Oh, the link isn't working?
Right.
Oh, we'll check the link.
And I was gonna be out of town, so I never looked at it to, I just knew I wasn't gonna be there.
we'll resolve this sooner or later.
All right, anything else for the commander? Speaking hearing none, thank you very much, Commander.
You're welcome.
Fire Department. Get out your checkbooks.
Mayor and council, we have two proposals for you tonight. The first one is requesting authorization for the fire department to hire up to 8 firefighters. From the transition from Ramsey, we retained 12 firefighters. They have performed exceptionally well. Assistant Chief Lawrence and myself could not be more proud of every challenge that they have worked themselves through the last 18 months. The feedback that we're getting on a daily basis is pretty incredible. But we also know that the number 12 is not sustainable for our operation. We are authorized for a strength of 20. We hope to bring on an additional 8 firefighters. Anecdotally, we've heard from some staff members that there may be some pre-trained firefighters in the area that are interested in making the switch over to now then. I don't anticipate that if all 8 hires are brand new, zero training, that we would move forward with a full allotment of 8 firefighters. But if we can mix in a couple pre-trained or pre-certified members, we would certainly push to that number 8. So before you tonight is a request for the fire department to move forward with hiring up to 8 firefighters. I'll be happy to answer any questions you might have.
What time frame are we aspirationally looking at?
So upon approval, we will start strategizing our recruitment strategy the rest of this week. We will then utilize every asset or resource that we have around us to get the word out. There's certainly third-party vendors that we can reach out to, put some signage out in front of the fire station. Social media has been a pretty successful avenue for reaching out for prospective candidates. We do have 2 names on file already that we would reach out to, so we would hope to get this up and running as quickly as possible. The pre-employment screening typically takes anywhere between 30 and 60 days between applications, interviews, mental health exams, medical exams. This group, we are going to miss the start of the Anoka County Fire Academy, so we would likely send them to emergency medical technician training first and then catch the next academy. The entire process to onboard new firefighters, I would anticipate, is going to take 12 to 14 months to get them from in the door to actually functioning and serving as a qualified firefighter.
Wow.
How did we come up with the number 20?
So 20 is kind of just a generic number. Quite honestly, there's no good number in a paid on-call part-time fire department. We are a transient staff at best. We're competing with people's personal time, work time, family time, church time. We've been pretty successful thus far with the number 12, but we know that's pretty low.
Okay.
Next door in St. Francis, we typically keep a staff of about 25, which seems to be fairly reliable. We do have to balance because there is consequence, right? The higher number of firefighters, the more pay that goes out, pension benefits, things do start to accumulate. But I think at 20, with our run volume, with the availability of our current staff, I think that'll be a good supplemental number to get to. It's certainly a number that is adjustable at any time, but I think that's a workable number.
And that was something when we were dealing with Jerry Stryker's our consultant, we did an analysis of run calls, response time. There was a fair amount of analysis, and that's what was determined at the time was optimal was 20 for a city our size with the call volume we had, so in the makeup. So I mean that's a number we've been working with since we first looked at separating from Ramsey. That's a number we talked to when we dealt with all the neighboring communities and looked at joint power agreements and other options that we had. So that's been our working number since Jerry worked that formula out for us.
And in all honesty, it is a bit of an arbitrary number, right? But I think that's something that we can work with some high degree of success.
So, do we have a ballpark? So you're talking about EMT training, the Anoka County training class, turnout gear, SCBA. What are we talking about in this 12 to 14 month process as far as dollars per candidate?
So right now, we're running about, depending on which vendor we utilize for EMT training, it could be anywhere between $1,600 and $1,900 per person. The good news is, at least for the current round of MBTFE or reimbursement money from the state for training, EMT does qualify. So we're optimistic that that will continue into next year, that we would be able to recoup some of those funds back from the state. The Fire Academy, we just got the bill for R5 or R4, and it was about $850 per candidate, which again is reimbursable from the MBTFE. So we do anticipate that some of that money would come back to the city. And lastly, on the turnout gear, the Minnesota State Fire Department Association does have approximately $1.4 million in grant money available for turnout gear. We would certainly submit those invoices for reimbursement through that grant program for turnout gear. So it's a little bit hard to substantiate what the total cost will be once we exclude out the grant money. I'm hoping that we can be as close to zero as possible. Unfortunately, I just can't guarantee you that today. But we do have a plan to offset the burden back to the city to onboard these new candidates.
How about SCBA?
So the SCBA piece we can talk about on the next agenda item. Right now, we're currently outfitted with 7 air packs for the entire department. So with a staff of 12, we currently don't have enough air packs for every firefighter if they were to show up and operating in a warm or hot zone. If we go up to 20, certainly that disparity grows. SCBA's right now, our quote is about $5,300 per. What we do hope to accomplish on the next request for council as part of replacing the tanker tender is to be able to purchase loose equipment to supplement those needs that we do have at the fire department. One of the challenges, and it's always difficult when you go through a separation such as we went through with Ramsey, we didn't have a robust supplement of equipment. And I think we were all pretty aware of some of those challenges coming into this. We wanted to make sure that we identified a pathway where we're not coming to council every month with another $30,000 or another $50,000. We wanted to figure out a way to get as functional as we can with the mission critical equipment. And I think we've discovered a way to do that with one funding mechanism, but it's certainly something that absolutely needs to be addressed. That's one of those mission critical pieces of equipment that we do not have enough of right now to function successfully or long term.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilmember Rainbow.
to Chief, so you're looking that you're going to strategize this week. Do you have any idea of approximate dates as far as application period will be open?
Typically, we like to keep the application period open for at least 30 days, especially, this is a unique process. Typically, recruitment had been done through the Ramsey Fire Department. So we're really kind of micro-focusing in just to the city of Nowthen or within our response. So it does include a little bit of Ramsey. But things that Ramsey had the ability to utilize, we haven't set up yet, such as the city fire department Facebook page. So we'd want to get that up and running so we can reach out to as many people as we can. Certainly, Lori and I can work together on some ideas that she may have, whether we still have time to get it into the newsletter, sending out mailers to residents. There's a lot of different avenues that we can utilize to connect. Quite frankly, our best recruitment tool is the 12 firefighters we have right now.
Right.
They're gonna be recruiting their friends, their neighbors, former coworkers, whatever the case may be. And now is the time. They're very excited, they're very happy that they're finally up and running. There's a lot of energy, positive energy right now, and we wanna leverage that to the best of our ability.
I had reached out to Assistant Chief Lawrence. There's a Facebook page that I would like to get some verbiage to put it out on that Facebook page.
Absolutely.
We also have the farmer's market, which is every Thursday, and if we could have something to display there, and we can provide that information to the residents. So,
At this point, I think every option is a good option, and we'll figure out kind of those avenues that provide us the best return moving forward.
So if something like that, if there was an event, you know, we've got the threshing show coming up, we've got, which draws a broader market.
Yep.
Certainly, I think the farmer's market's a good opportunity. Would it be reasonable to have either the rescue rig or a grass rig
Absolutely.
there to have people come by and
Even if we weren't hiring, I think it would be a really good idea to have the fire
We
department
should have
there.
it at the car show too.
Yeah, you
Yeah,
know,
good
depending on
idea.
where we're at in the hiring process. I was thinking even the newsletters, that comes out September. So,
And even if we miss them on this hiring process, just the fact that they can see in the newsletter that the department is growing and that there's potentially opportunities, because this is gonna be a perpetual process of hiring and training firefighters. This is what the part-time fire service is, right? As much as we hope to have a high degree of retention, I can tell you in 26 years of experience, and I'm sure Joe and Lori would probably echo the same thing, retention is our challenge, right? It's not the greatest paying job in the world. We give you a pager, we tell you, we don't know when this is gonna go off or how long we're gonna need you, but when it goes off, we certainly hope you show up. And that creates a competitive balance within people's lives. So we understand that the people that we hire today may not be here next year. They may not be here in 5 years. We hope they all have a very long and enjoyable career, but this is something that we're gonna have to refine as we move forward. And I think just getting it out in the newsletter and having people understand and see and really build that connection moving forward is gonna be advantageous.
I think we've been spoiled with the retention we have. And you see the length of service and the 12 we've got. I mean, we've got a lot of long-term firefighters here, so.
I certainly hope so. That's always our goal.
You know, I've got relatives in Maple Grove, Plymouth, Minnetonka, and every time I see one of their newsletters, they have a video that says, here's what it is, here's what we're looking for, here's what it is to be a firefighter. Do we have any tool like that that we could put on the website or, you know, at the last Fire Protection Council meeting, Jerry had said he was turning over, was it your company or?
He owns Minfire.
What was
He
it?
works for the state fire marshal's office, recruiting and retention.
And so what was, he was doing something where he was authorizing the fire chiefs to be able to use this now. He was turning it
That's
over.
Minfire.
That's Minfire?
Yeah.
So is that,
Yep, we can certainly reach out and get connected with Minfire. It's a great resource. It connects people that are looking for jobs to job availability. It's a great resource. A lot of departments and a lot of people do use that as one of their resources for recruiting people. I'm certainly not opposed to utilizing that. It's really gonna be kind of trial by fire, no pun intended, to see what really connects in this community, because each community is different. The way we recruited in Brooklyn Park is different than how we recruit in St. Francis. And how we recruit in St. Francis is different than how they recruit in St. Louis Park. Every community responds differently, and we have to figure out what that mix is, which is why we anticipate trying a lot of things this hiring process to try and gauge where we get that return. And those things do evolve over time, but I think we got some pretty good ideas of where we can start. You know, I think there is a buzz in this community right now, even outside of the firefighters, that now then fire department is a thing, and there's certainly some interest. So I'm optimistic that we'll be able to reach out and get some highly qualified potential candidates, and we'll just make sure that we're paying attention on what avenue works best for reaching those candidates.
all right? Anything else for the chiefs?
Mr. Mayor,
Councilmember
if
Rainville.
there's nothing else, I would move that the council authorize the fire department to hire up to 8 additional firefighters.
I second it.
Have a motion, a second. Any other discussion? Seeing and hearing none, all those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. The second request before you today is a request to authorize the fire department to spend up to $600,000 to replace the tanker tender. The background on the current tanker, it's a 1989, it's a 2-seat vehicle. Currently, the pump is not operational, which is a piece of information that was not shared with us during the transition process. So it did catch myself and Assistant Chief Lawrence a little bit off guard. Due to the overall age, condition, and limitations of this vehicle, both Assistant Chief Lawrence and I feel that making any more investments to make this vehicle operational, even in its limited capacity, is not a wise use of funds. We have been working through a vehicle purchase for the city of St. Francis, so we do have some very recent experience on how this process goes. Before you is a proposal from Fire Safety USA, who typically deals with E1 fire apparatus, which is owned by the Rev Group. The Rev Group does provide a number of financing options, which I've included in the packet, anywhere from 5, 7, or 10-year financing. There's zero money down as a part of this purchase, so that gives the city and the council some time to figure out how to make this work in 2022 and the budgeting years to follow. As we alluded to in the previous presentation, the other thing that this potentially gives us the opportunity to do is purchase that necessary loose equipment as part of the vehicle purchase. Whether that's SCBA's, we made a list that we can share with you guys. Hose, rescue tools, saws, nozzles, positive pressure fans, generator, lighting, water rescue equipment, SCBA's, toolboxes, traffic control, thermal imagers, tool clamps, hangers, medical equipment, especially AEDs and Lucas devices, which is going to be a large part of our response and has been a large part of our response, and just miscellaneous tools such as axes, hand tools, tools of the trade, so to speak. I believe that in this purchase, we will come in under the $600,000 mark. The way that I typically like to present these options is we'll talk about the shock of the sticker price, and we'll find ways to make sure that we bring that dollar value down. The fact of the matter is, if our engine were to go down, we have no other vehicle that can flow water. That is the reality of where we're at in the fire department. So this is a mission critical purchase. Build time for these vehicles is anywhere from 12 to 15 months. So it does require us to move relatively quickly because this is a long-term project. And it'll take us some time to really work through the specs and get that price point down to where we need it to be and still maintain a quality vehicle for the fleet. So with that, again, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
So right now, you're talking about the extra equipment. Is there anything off the existing tanker that's useful to the new potential piece of equipment?
Maybe some sections of hose. Maybe. We'll have to run through some hose testing on the hose that currently resides on that vehicle. There's a handful of small tools that we would possibly retain. There's not much on that vehicle.
And the additional equipment you'd be talking about grouping in with this, the ancillary tools you just ran through, is that partially because we're expanding the department?
Partially, yes. So it's really, it's a multifaceted approach. The existing tools and equipment that were left is not up to standard. So we do have some needs just in what was left, whether it's on Rescue 1, Engine 50, the tanker, or the grass rig. Some of the equipment that we're looking to replace is either aging out or will age out very soon, such as the extrication equipment. So there's certainly needs that we're going to use to properly staff the entire fleet, but also this vehicle will be set up to sit at least 4, preferably 5 firefighters. It will operate as an engine as well as a pumper or as a tender, that if engine 50 were to go down, we still have the capacity to roll out the door and flow water. So it will really give us a higher level of redundancy, and again, it gives us the ability to kind of acquire those small tools and equipment kind of in one fell swoop moving forward. So it will outfit the tanker completely, but it'll also outfit the rest of the needs for the entire fleet.
And we had mentioned in the discussion in the previous RCA that the SCBA, right now we have 7 or 12.
Correct.
Ideally, do you have 1-for-1 on SCBA?
So in my experience, if we had 20 firefighters all show up to the same call, I'd probably fall over out of my chair. But we do need enough to maintain operational capacity on the fire ground, and we don't have that today, and we certainly would not have that going up to 20. So I think the number that we're kind of kicking around was somewhere between 15 to 18 packs. And again, that gives us some redundancy. These things do fail. They do require maintenance. So if we did have an SCBA that failed, we now have additional redundancy where we're not risking our operational capacity if that were to happen.
And the 600 grand includes that?
Correct.
What's the cost to,
Councilmember Alders.
what's the cost to replace the pump if we go down that route? Do we know what that cost is?
We don't know what that cost is, partially because, as we talked about earlier, the value just isn't there. I have reached out to Chief Koner to ask about the status and why that pump is disabled, if it's because it's a catastrophic failure and it's not replaceable. And I still have not gotten an answer back, and I'll continue to work out a resolution to that. But again, if we were to simply replace or repair the pump, those repairs typically aren't cheap. We'd probably be looking somewhere between $5,000 and $20,000, if it's even possible to be repaired. Full replacement could run even a little bit more expensive than that. And again, I think making investments in that fleet, although quick and less expensive, we're gonna have this discussion a year from now, or 2 years from now, or 3 years from now. Additionally, the pump that's on there, it's not a structural rated fire apparatus, so if the engine did go down and we were to repair the pump on there, we're still only sending 2 firefighters, and the pump capacity is not such that NFPA would recognize that as a structurally rated vehicle.
So you're saying that that only carries 2 firefighters?
Correct. You could squeeze 3 in there. We don't recommend it, but it's essentially a bench seat up front. Picture a 1975 Dodge pickup.
So the potential purchase here would be structured similar to the engine 50?
It would
As
be
far as capacity?
correct.
Firefighter
So it'll have a
capacity.
little bit higher water capacity. Engine 50 has a 1,000-gallon tank. With this tanker pumper, we're looking closer to a 2,000-gallon tank. That keeps us under the dual axle threshold, which certainly keeps the price down a little bit. It'll have a structural rated pump. I think we're looking at 1,500 or 1,750, 1250. 1250 pump. It would have the ability to operate as a fire engine as well as a tender, where engine 50 doesn't have that capacity. Engine 50 is not going to be shuttling water back and forth from a fire. So it will build in that redundancy. If we were to have a problem with engine 50, we could still operate as an engine with this purchase.
Where do we
Mr.
fill
Mayor?
up with water today?
Councilmember Alders, I think Councilmember Rainville had a question here.
So to Chief Schmidt, so question, these additional tools that we'd be purchasing, are we able to have access to those prior to the delivery of the truck, or do they come with the truck?
Some, yes, we absolutely could.
Okay, all right. And then a question on the financing.
Yes.
Is this $600,000, excuse me, if we were able to find a lower interest rate through our bonding company, can we still do it without using this REV?
You could
Still
absolutely,
purchase it from the company
Yep.
without using REV?
you could absolutely bond for something like this,
Okay.
right? The one thing that I wanted to do is provide you with some options.
Right.
There are a little bit more hoops to jump through as far as a bonding process. But I would be certainly happy to work with Lori and her staff on identifying how to bond for this if that is the council's direction. For Assistant Chief Lawrence and I, this is kind of the kicking off point. We don't want to get bogged down in the minutia of trying to figure out what this looks like until we know we can move forward, right? Because if we're not going to move forward with this, we're going to shift our attention and focus into some other places. But this is certainly, in my opinion, and Chief Lawrence can agree or disagree, this is the largest priority right now for the fire department, without question.
And to Chief Schmidt, I don't disagree with that. I just don't know, and I'm not familiar with bond rates right now. 2.5% up to 2.81 is not a bad rate. I'm not saying that's a high rate, but I just don't know if through our bonding agent, if they have something that would be hopefully less, and then that would cost us less.
Absolutely.
So,
And Mayor and Council, when this came through last week, I did reach out to, we are getting ready to bond for the road improvements, and I asked if there's a possibility, if we were to go this
Okay.
route, what that would look like. So,
Okay, perfect.
After tonight, we'll know if we're moving forward on that.
All right. All right, thank you.
And the understanding that we didn't know the condition, nobody told us the pump wasn't working, that it was shut down and may or may not be repairable. At this point, it doesn't look like it is, but when we had the joint powers agreement, we had 2 sets of equipment. We had 2 full stations backing up everything we did. And I remember when we were interviewing, that's one of the things that was brought up is we have no redundancy. If you're going to go independent, everything you've got's in that building. We didn't know the condition of it, so we weren't quite as concerned then, but now certainly it is a more critical matter. And again, thinking that we have a fairly new engine, we did have the discussion early on about deer and accidents, and there's things besides engine breakdown that could take that out of commission, and we don't have a backup. So,
Absolutely. Which we
that
did.
said, we do have mutual aid and aid with other cities should something happen. We're not up that famous creek without a paddle, but
Funny you should mention it because we just received email from staff this week that they did almost to the deer the other night with the incident, so the wildlife is definitely moving right now.
Yep. All right. Other questions? Councilmember Alders, you had another question?
Where do we fill these things up at here?
Right now, we're utilizing either Elk River or St. Francis, and we're filling up directly from our municipal water supply.
In Elk River or St. Francis?
Correct.
So if we have a fire, we gotta go to Elk River first or St. Francis?
Depending on which is closer. Correct.
The trucks,
Twin Lake.
the trucks are
Full.
full.
Right, but
Mr. Mayor,
Councilmember
didn't
Blake.
we sometime in the fall, didn't we authorize $80,000 for a well for a tank, to fill the tanker trucks we were gonna put in?
And that discussion is still out there.
I thought we agreed to it. What, do
We,
you have minutes on that at all?
October of 2020, the well was approved.
So why didn't we do it?
Yeah, December of 2020, I was asked to put it on hold.
So why haven't we gone forward with Mr. Mayor?
because we were transitioning to the new department, and it was put to the chief to prioritize. We had multiple options. We had 2 well companies that had differing opinions on utilizing the city land near the fire station as to whether it was feasible or not. We have property owners in town who were willing to go on a joint venture with the city to cut the cost and put in a well near downtown here. The question was where, with the options we have on Elk River, St. Francis, Ramsey, and Oak Grove, where's the best place for a well? So that discussion was put on hold.
But, Mr. Mayor, my question is, when did all this happen? I don't remember any of this discussion. All I remember is that we voted on this and agreed to do a well, and now all of a sudden I'm hearing all this went on. When did it go on, and why didn't we know anything about this?
The well discussion was part of that was in transition from consulting to hiring a fire department. The numbers were extremely different. The 70,000, the one company wasn't going to touch it for 70,000. The other one said we didn't have the geology for it, and they would have to do multiple test wells. So the 70,000 was authorized didn't include the test wells. So that number wasn't necessarily a number that was going to be an actual number. We had other options that could impact that number. And at that point, the chief said that's not his highest priority because they have other options on doing that.
So the chief decided you didn't think we needed the well?
I didn't say we don't need the well. So I will accept some of the blame on this discussion. One of the things that the mayor had brought up is the well. And during the transition period, we were dealing with pensions and hiring of firefighters and inventorying equipment and discovering the issues that we needed to prioritize. So I'll accept some of the blame on the well. The other part of the well discussion that needs to be recognized is where are we going to put it? And I think one of the things that both myself and Chief Lawrence were not up to speed on is the entire geography, what made the most sense, where the water table was accessible, and we didn't have any of the background, right? We weren't here in October, we don't have that background, we don't have all of the data. So I will accept my part in that of pumping the brakes a little bit on the well, because of everything else that we had to deal with. We do have water availability in almost every neighboring city. So when we have that capacity, it's not that we're not doing it. It slid down my priority list, and I think Chief Lawrence would agree with that assessment as well. So I will accept my blame in that piece of it. We will continue to look for the best place and the best strategy long-term for the well. That's something that is not lost on us. So don't think that we forgot about it or we're ignoring it.
Well, Mr. Mayor, my point is, how did all this happen without anything coming back to the council? Why weren't we informed of this, that we had voted on something, agreed on something, and it was decided not to use it? Why wasn't the council?
Yeah, who was making the call?
Yeah,
Who were you
and-
talking to? Were you talking to Lori?
I have talked to both Lori and Mayor Pilon about,
Okay, then we should have
Slow down on the
been communicated with that we would agree with this.
and I'll accept my part of the blame and apologize. I didn't know that it was already approved, voted on, plans, right?
Okay, but our mayor did, so.
There are
then
no
maybe-
plans. We voted the money and the money is available.
Okay,
But-
but you should have communicated that you decided not to use this money.
I haven't
when-
decided not to use it.
Well, then what, we should have started it, it was in October, we should have had a well by now.
Where
I
you
mean,
want-
who
where do you
decided
want-
to hold back the well without telling the council? That's what I'm asking.
The question is, where does the well go?
No, the question is.
Who decides where the well goes?
No, the question is, why wasn't there a discussion that the well had been put on hold? And that we voted on something, we agreed to it, never came back to us that it wasn't gonna happen. And it should have,
No,
because it's a council decision.
we agreed on a dollar amount, which may or may not be realistic. We did not agree on a vendor or a location,
Because it never came back to us.
because it has never come up to the new fire department. I will say, and we've had this discussion, probably every time we've bumped into each other, I ask about the well.
Correct.
Because we have,
So why is that coming back to the council? Because it should go to Lori, and Lori should send out the minutes on, here's the status with the well, because I wasn't involved because it was October. But the bottom line is the city council approved to install a well for the new fire station, and it's not done, and we find out that the brakes have been pumped for all the right reasons, but only you and the chief know about it. So that's the problem. So the communication piece needs to roll through Lori, and Lori needs to send out the minutes on what the discussion is so the rest of the council is aware of what's going on.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Raymond.
I will say at the time that we authorized a well, we didn't have a time frame associated with it. We also didn't have a location. We didn't know the geography of the land of where we could even put one. Is there a place suitable for it, close to the station or across, wherever? So it would have been foolish to go ahead and spend $80,000 on a well that we don't know if it would be sufficient for us, so.
Don't care about that. The
That's
process
not
is
the
the
point,
problem.
Mary.
The
That's not the
process.
point at all. Nobody's saying that. Everybody's agreeing that this was probably the right choice. The point is, why wasn't the council communicated that this decision was being put on hold and that we weren't as a council, we should be in on that because we voted on it.
Right.
I don't disagree, it's the right call.
No.
The problem is we can't have someone making the call without the council being involved. And that's the problem.
And if I may interject, Mr. Mayor,
Chief Schmidt.
it would be helpful for Joe and I to understand what decisions the council wants to be involved with and which they don't. And I'm just saying this to be fair to Chief Lawrence and myself. If this is an expectation, I need to know what that line is, right? I need to know, do you want to know daily decisions, weekly decisions, monthly decisions, capital purchases? We have a pretty good feel of things like this, hiring and purchasing,
Yeah.
that we want to make sure that this is a collective discussion. In fairness to Chief Lawrence and myself, I need to know where that line is, right? So just so you don't get caught off guard, because I'm as surprised at this discussion as maybe you are to hearing why it's not moving forward. So I want to make sure that we're not creating a foul, number one. And two, I want to know what that threshold is, so when Chief Lawrence and I come across things, that it gets disseminated in a way that's appropriate. And again, I want to make clear, I will accept my part of the blame in this discussion. I'll also acknowledge the fact that if that is the threshold for council communication, I just want to have that information at the ready, so I don't misstep, right? So collectively, if Joe and I could get some guidance on that, that would be helpful, because I do send stuff out to Lori quite regularly for communication for you guys. And if there's something that got omitted, it certainly wasn't intentional from our part, but I do want to make sure that we know where that line is, so we don't set up for discussions like this. Is that fair?
So I will ask, what was approved? What was approved last year?
Who are you asking?
Whoever knows. And I'm being told we approved something, and then we changed our mind. What was approved?
Mr. Mayor,
Councilmember Rainville.
I believe we approved $80,000
That's what I have.
to install a well,
Yeah, that's what I have.
but with nothing behind it to know if that was a valid number, if anything.
I believe it might have been 70, but it was $70,000 or $80,000.
Yeah,
Okay, then what
I
else
have
was
80.
approved?
That
And what else was
$80,000 to
Okay,
install the well.
And so who is going to install the well?
So the motion was that the council agreed to spend $80,000 to install a well, and everybody agreed on it.
Okay,
And from there, that's in,
so who had the discussion with the potential well drillers?
Well, who had the discussion to communicate, yeah. and
you
to-
were involved in that.
That was Jerry. Jerry's the only one that has documents from those experiences.
So Jerry was always sending all of his information to the whole council.
Okay, so what did the council, which vendor did the council approve, and where did they approve it?
I don't know that ever got to that point.
It didn't come to
Because
us.
in December, it was, you said to put the brakes on everything. I have the email. I had a company called Trout in St. Cloud contacting me. They're ready to get started. They had a permit in place, and then I asked you, I said, I need to know what direction to go, and you said to put it on hold. So I told the company to put it on hold, and I probably should have came back to council and said, does council agree with this?
Yeah, it shouldn't have been put on hold with just the mayor's choice
So-
to do that.
Mr. Mayor, going forward.
Councilmember Alders.
Going forward, Lori is where the communication, so these two guys should be flowing their information to Lori.
Right.
So whether it's purchase decisions, how they run, the hours that they want to run, how many people, that stuff should be going directly to Lori, correct?
Well, the contract says they report to us. Contract says they report to the council.
Yeah, but how can they do that if they don't go through Lori, because unless they call each one of us?
I think right now they're communicating it through email to the council. Anything that I've seen come out from the fire department goes to all of us and Lori.
So, Mayor and Council, in your interview, when we interviewed you for the position, and Joe Coleman asked, who do you report to? What were you told?
I can't recall the specific answer at that time.
And regardless of that, for whatever reason, when the attorney drafted the contract, he structured it that they answer to the council.
Well, and we all answer to the council, but how can they communicate with the entire council? When they have questions and when they need to get some answers, they should have all of council, not just one person. Because
You know,
the
and
rest
I
of the
don't
council-
disagree.
The rest of the council is not getting the information.
At the time, we were in transition. We were transitioning from Jerry as a consultant to a full-time contract with the city of St. Francis. We were coming off a very demanding time for the city staff because of the elections. We've never been through an election like we've been through. We had transition coming in on the council. And out of nowhere, a guy shows up and says, I'm ready to start drilling. Now, I don't know who gave him approval. I don't know where. The geology suddenly changed, and I have no idea what his dollar amount was. And at that point, it didn't make sense. I just said, we don't have authorization to do any of that, because we don't even know if it's going to come in anywhere close to the budget. We had a new chief that was trying to set up, and at the time he said, my biggest priority is getting organized, getting through this transition period. We have water. Now, I will say that any time that probably, if we're in the 7th month here, I will say I've asked 14 times where we sit on a well, just so we get back to the council. Because we do have residents in town here that are offered to partner. And I've given that information. I said, that's got to go through staff. We have businesses in town here who have offered to pay for the thing. That's got to go through staff. They're not ready to handle it yet. So there are options that are different from what we discussed last year, where we take on the entire cost and we figure out where we want it. At the time, we were just going to throw it in next to the ice rink so we could also flood the ice rink. But in discussion, not only with Chief Schmidt, but with other candidates that came in, the question was, what do you want to do about the well? And geology was part of it. Geography was part of it. And where does it make sense where we have access to water? So it wasn't that I was making decisions. It was that obviously we didn't have enough information to go on it. And what I was being told is, with the other things we've got going on here, we have water. That's not our highest priority yet. So it hadn't come back to the council for a final decision. The money's there. We budgeted the money, and it's not going anywhere. But if we could do it for less or no money, I'd certainly prefer that, because then we could put more money into other equipment here. But it has not come up again for council discussion, other than if I said somebody shows up and they're ready to start digging a well, we have there was no discussion as a council, is that where we want to go with that company? We had not approved that company. We had not approved that location. And that had never been discussed with our new fire department. So it was one of those things that in the transition in December, it seemed like the best thing to do is, we're not drilling wells in the middle of winter anyway. Let's put it in a priority when the department's set up. We then spent our time on the Relief Association, getting legislation through, and recruiting and setting up a fire department.
Okay,
Yeah.
let's move on. So I mean,
Yeah, if we've
bottom
gone
line
around
is,
it.
I think you need to we need to own the fact that you made the call to stop it, and it didn't go back to council for a lot of the right reasons, but at the end of the day, that's not how it works. So if we made the call for all the right reasons, great. Then we can have the discussion back on, hey, I think the best decision is, let's stop this thing because there's 5 other things we can do. So I don't want to drag into, there's a transition period, but that's the way this team needs to work. Or we're going to get into what's going on over here? So, and I didn't realize it was quite a huge bucket of fish when I stepped in it, but I was wondering how we filled the trucks because I didn't see a big well out there. So, all right, back to the truck. Come around.
Well, Mr. Mayor, I have something to say if I can speak. I'm sitting back with some, what I see is we need to establish a communication network. So Lori.
Okay, this is not the time for that. We've got a motion on the truck, yes?
Yes.
We've talked about the importance of communication. We set up a meeting for it in February. We set up
Okay.
multiple meetings, and it came up at previous meetings. And we agree that we need improved communication.
So we're
And
discussing that in February?
we discussed it last February, and we haven't gotten back to it yet. We discussed it the previous February, and we haven't gotten back to it yet.
Okay.
And so, as a council meeting, right now, we have before us a truck. And so we'll deal with that at this point. And certainly, we can put council communication on the agenda, but since it's not on the agenda tonight, we'll leave it at that. If there was confusion because of how this got stopped and the whole council didn't get a chance to vote on it, we will remedy that. But at this point, we do not have a vendor approved for a well. We do not have options investigated as to low cost, no cost, or full cost.
Let's go
or
to
geology.
this. Let's just go to this. We're done with that.
All right, so Mr. Mayor,
Councilmember Rainville.
I would move that the council authorize the fire department to spend up to $600,000 to purchase a replacement tanker tender as discussed in the background and supplemental information on the RCA, and including staff is to investigate alternative financing options.
I second that motion.
And that's to include the incidental equipment as noted as well.
Yes, under the supplemental information.
Okay, so we have a motion from Councilmember Rainville and a second from Councilmember Blake. Do we have any other discussion?
Do we have $600,000?
We will have,
We're
Mr.
gonna
Mayor.
have to research financing options.
So again, as part of the discussion, part of the motion, I believe Councilmember Rainville said for the fire chief to work with staff to come up with the best financing options. We have an option here from the Rev Group, and we have, Lori has reached out, I assume, to Ellers, who's doing our bonding.
Ellers.
All right, and
Mr.
so they will come up with a reasonable option for funding.
And Mr. Mayor,
Councilmember
to
Rainville.
Councilmember Alders, then whatever this yearly payment is, we will have to work that into our budget.
We also have in a capital improvement plan from our fire department previously, a tanker truck, I believe it's in this coming year.
2022.
Yeah.
And, but they had allocated $125,000. So we realize that's a little short, but if that is in our capital improvement plan, that certainly has potential for down payment and can change these numbers. So,
Mr. Mayor,
Councilmember Alders.
if we figure out how to finance that, could we take that 125 for that? And so we still haven't bought a snowplow truck that we said we needed to buy as well. So, and the
Well, we'll have a capital improvement discussion a week from today, so that'll be a good time to
The
talk
other
about it.
question I've got is, does it still make sense? I mean, this thing's a year and a half out. We said we got zero redundancy. If it's 20 or 30,000 bucks to fix this old Bessie, do we still look at doing that so we have some redundancy, or do we?
We
think-
certainly can, I'm sorry to cut you off. We certainly can have somebody come and do a full diagnostic on it. We just had a company come out and do a diagnostic on the rest of the fleet. We excluded that just until we knew where things stood with this. We can certainly go down that path. Currently, what we're utilizing is out of St. Francis to cover the capacity and the ability. So we're more than happy to continue to provide those services
Okay.
in perpetuity until we can get this up and running.
So it's not mission critical if it's not functional.
Correct.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilmember Greenberg.
is old Bessie, available to be sold? Would anyone be interested in her?
Do you want to take that one, Chief?
He's laughing. He's laughing. I about know what old Bessie's probably worth.
Yeah, so we just got rid of an engine in St. Francis, and it had sat on auction for almost a year, and I think we ended up selling, and that truck was a 2003?
93.
93, okay. So a few years younger and, in much better shape, and it sold for $200 or $300. I mean, we were having trouble. We had to put batteries in it just to get it out the door, so it was a break even.
We're not gonna make money on it, is what you're telling us.
But let me ask this, we have a former tanker that sits over in our maintenance building that we use currently for making ice in the wintertime. Would it be reasonable to take the better of these two trucks and keep that as a reserve, and if we need it for maintenance, for roads or ice rinks or whatever, but would it be of any value to the fire department as a redundancy?
Potentially, we would have to figure out what that looked like from a policy standpoint on who goes and gets it, when is it available. I'm certainly more than happy to defer whether that has value or not to the public works staff, and which vehicle would serve them better. And certainly if this one does serve them better, they can have it. So,
I just don't want to start a collection of old fire trucks.
I would strongly recommend.
The
not
other
doing
one
that.
is just as old and in worse shape, and it's got split rims, and it's gas, and it's not a good truck.
You're not gonna
If
get
public works
200.
staff feels it has value, I will certainly help push it over to their garage.
I mean, as a council, I would just like to get rid of one of them when we get to that point, so. Any other discussion?
Mr. Mayor,
Councilmember Rainville.
I just have a question. You, Chief Schmidt, you brought up the Twin Lake Parks well. Is that operational?
Yes.
At one time, a firefighter told us it wasn't. And so, and I never asked any further. So that is we have the ability to fill the tankers there.
Correct.
All right, thank you.
Good, that's good to know.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilmember Greenberg.
Fire Chief Schmidt, do you know what the capacity is of that well over at Twin Lakes?
I do not.
Does anyone know?
I know that it's not a good location because it's right there at the boat launch. And so to get a truck in there
So,
with all the
Problem.
traffic and with all the boats and trailers,
Okay.
and then to hook it up, if we were to do it, it would have made more sense to put it on Pickerel Lake because we've got a DNR landing there with rarely any vehicles in it. But that would be a very difficult spot to get a tanker in and out of, especially if we're busy in the park, because it's right there at the boat launch, so.
yeah, that is a bad spot.
You're probably quicker running over to Elk River, and Station 3 is supposed to be up and running within the year here,
I think 18 months is their goal.
Where's Station 3 gonna be?
By the
right next to the school
On
and
Twin
Twin
Lakes.
Lakes.
Oh, really? Oh, that's good for us.
Fairgrounds.
But right now,
It's up at Fairgrounds.
you guys, when you go to Elk River, do you go to
Really
Hydrant?
familiar with fairgrounds is.
It's right at the elementary school, I think, Twin Lakes Elementary.
Oh.
Great, all right, thank you.
All right, any other questions or comments? Seeing and hearing none. All those in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you, Mayor and Council.
600.
It won't be all 600.
All right, well, we're 20 minutes off schedule here, let's keep moving. CST Industrial Building, conditional use permit is being requested to allow exception to the building material requirements as outlined in section 11-5-3K of the city code. The recommendation of the Planning and Zoning Commission on June 22nd, 2021.
So, Mr. Mayor, I did pass out a revised facade
Yeah.
drawing tonight. The commission recommended that they, instead of putting 7 feet of wainscot on the west side and the warehouse,
Thanks, guys.
around the warehouse area, that it looked a little awkward, so they recommended going back down to the 4-foot wainscot. And then keeping 3 feet around the office area. And there is supposed to be some brick around the front door. We can add that in. So they're approximately 58% metal, the stucco panels. I did bring this example of how these are embossed panels. They're insulated. So they are higher grade than just a regular sheet metal siding in a typical pole barn. So, as the ordinance requires, you know, they have, the property owner has to prove that this is superior. I do believe it is from all the research done and the fact that it's insulated and embossed to look like stucco. You can see the appearance in the facade, how it looks, is an upgraded look from just a regular sheet metal. So that's,
Liz, I need to stop you.
Sure.
I forgot that we stuck a public hearing in here.
okay.
So we will retrace our steps and we will open a public hearing on the CST industrial building, as I just quoted. So the public hearing is open. Lori, did notices go out for this public hearing?
Yes, they do.
Okay. Is anybody here to speak to the public hearing? Going once, going twice, seeing and hearing nobody for the public hearing, we will close the public hearing. Public hearing is closed at 8:25. All right, now you can proceed.
Okay, thank you. So, it's my best recommendation that we proceed with these higher quality materials. They've upgraded the whole front office, as you can see in the facade drawing, and have met all the other requirements of our zoning ordinance regarding screening. Fencing is 10 feet around a portion of that outdoor storage area. So all you're approving tonight would be the CUP to allow this deviation in building materials and an interim use permit to allow the outdoor storage. There were some conditions added, if you didn't notice. I redlined the planning and zoning findings to clarify a couple things that were talked about at planning and zoning. We specifically limited the number of trucks and trailer combinations that could be parked on site. Outside, the allowance of 5 forklifts and a couple other details. But the plat is not expected to come back to you until next month. There were just some snafus between the applicant's engineer and the city engineer regarding the type of pond. So we need to get that figured out prior to issuance of any building permit. But we can issue a building permit on the site without having the land platted. And if they need it, they have applied for a temporary access permit to Highway 47.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilmember Rainville.
I would move that the council approves the conditional use permit for PID 243325120005, requesting to allow exemption to the building material requirements is out, and according to the facts and findings presented to and amended by the P&Z committee, and then presented to council.
Mr. Mayor?
And also the interim use is separate. Everything. Okay.
Councilmember Alders?
Are you approving
Yeah.
both of them? Or make a
Well,
motion for both of them?
I would move both, if it's appropriate. There are two separate agenda items, but I would move both at the same time.
Okay.
For simplicity.
I'll second that.
We have a motion from Councilmember Rainville, second by Councilmember Alders. Question on your findings and recommendations. The original 19, the lighting plan is scratched out. Why was that scratched out again?
Because prior to planning and zoning, they had amended that lighting plan to meet the ordinance requirement.
Okay.
Yeah, they made some changes to lights and put shields on them, so it was
Yeah.
within the property
I remember
boundaries.
that.
All right. Any other questions or comments?
Mr. Mayor,
Councilmember Greenberg.
was there a discussion on hours of operation?
No, we typically don't do that in an industrial zone.
Okay.
I mean, we did discuss it in the sense that most of their truck traffic is during the day, 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. There are a few stragglers, but most often we do not put hours of operation on when they're in an industrial zone. If it's like a home business in a residential neighborhood, that would be completely different.
Is there a residential area butted right up against them?
No, they are not right up against them. They're over a quarter mile to the east into Oak Grove.
And the development that will come in as residential is not immediately abutting this property.
Correct.
And there will be a buffer between that residential and the commercial park, or industrial park.
Correct.
Property to the south is already industrial,
Right.
and the north is rural residential ag.
Right, so the people on the north side of the industrial park will be required to have a buffer along their rear line on the
But
north
typically
side.
in the industrial park, we don't limit hours because the industry is different. It's industrial park, not residential.
Right, and some industries have 2 shifts, et cetera, so it's hard to place hours on that.
Any other questions or comments? Seeing and hearing none, all those in favor of the motion to approve the conditional use permit as requested and the interim use permit for outdoor storage. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you for waiting.
It's gonna be cool.
Yeah, looks good.
Yeah.
And then we have to put a giant well over our place for the fire suppression, so we might be. Some water from us. Yeah, so you're right. I think we can carry like 40,000 gallons of water, so it'll be a lot of water.
It's not a bad idea, Chad.
So, thank you.
Thank you.
See you guys.
Good night.
All right, next on here, Allied Blacktop Company. So is Allied Blacktop who's doing the work for the state?
Correct, so the state chose Allied to do the apron on 199th. And they were all set to get going, and I said, whoa, hold on, recall that we had asked them, to let me know when they chose a company that could give them a bid, so they have provided the bid for extending the paved portion of the street further down to where the second driveway is on Burns Auto.
So, Mr. Mayor,
Councilmember Rainville.
to Ms. Stockman, I guess I'm confused by this. So, under the bid, it says Highway 40, the last entry is Highway 47 approach paid for by MDOT. So is that part of this $32,000, or, because when you look at the blue line, it starts at 47 and goes back past that second driveway? And,
No, they are covering the apron, so 32,303 would be from the apron to the end of the second driveway.
So the total 32,303 is excluding the Highway 47 approach paid for by MinDOT.
Correct.
Is that, I mean, do we know that that's 270 feet from the approach back? Mr. Mayor,
Councilmember Rainville.
and I guess I'm looking at this $32,000, and it's a straight piece of dirt road. We don't have to do any, they don't have to really do any work, just put the asphalt down. Seems to me a high bid, especially when I look at the bid or the estimate to do the work over on, in Rogers Lake, which is the road, and now we figure out a cul-de-sac when I look at the pictures, and that's 32,000, and there's a lot more work over there than there is here. So do we know, I mean, did we by chance ask any local or any other paving companies for a bid on it?
No, I mean, that would be your prerogative at a later date. This was while they were doing the apron.
Okay.
And the state's paying for the apron,
The
excuse me,
state's
Mr.
paying for the
Mayor.
apron, right.
I think our discussion was.
Councilmember Alders.
They were there, can they go back another couple hundred feet, I think was the direction, right? So when they make that, what's the number?
Right. If
So-
nothing else, it's a comparison. You either have to just yay or nay it, and if you want to nay it, that's totally fine, and you can get your own bids later. It was never really discussed as to how it would be paid for anyway,
Yeah.
because we have no, I mean, unless it's assessed to the properties on either side, you know, that were paid for by the city. But we have no open permits or anything, you know, at this date. So it came up during discussion of the interim use permit for the Burns Auto reuse site.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilmember Greenberg.
I think the residents on that street would like to have the business owners pay for that stretch. If they would have to pay for it, I don't think they were really in favor for it.
Well, again, I think Councilmember Rainville's point, we're taking a look at what it's costing us. At Rogers Lake, we're looking at taking a sand driveway, in effect, what's a sand driveway going back to two houses, and rebuilding that with installing a proper base and doing everything to construct a road for approximately this. And I'm gonna guess, I'm trying to think how long that 185th is, but it might be twice as long as this. And you're taking a sand driveway and turning it into a road. This is taking a existing class 5 and just throwing blacktop on top of it. And they're saying there's no base preparation, they're gonna grade the existing class 5 and put down 2 inches of base and 1.5 inch wear coat. And
So Mr. Mayor,
Councilmember Blake.
so we probably are gonna wanna look into other options. I mean, we're not agreeing on this tonight anyway, are we? On this
Well, I think that the reason this came up is MinDOT all of a sudden shows up and says, we're ready to go with the apron. And we said, well, we wanted to understand what it would cost. Is it a reasonable cost to go back to the driveways of the affected businesses? Now, when I was out there looking at this, I go back to the agreements we had with the business on the north, and I'm not sure those are being abided by. What's happening on the south, there's maybe 8 cars there, kind of randomly in that parking lot. They threw some siding on part of the building, and I don't think anything that we agreed on in that development has happened like we agreed on. Now, I don't know what the time frame is, I don't know if things are still happening, but I see individual signage on every building. I thought we were gonna have uniform signage, but there's randomly placed signs next to the doors, above the doors, on the doors, all different fonts and sizes. So there's at least 8, 10 different people operating in the buildings there. The exteriors have not been done. I don't know if any of the interior agreements on bathrooms and everything else has been done, but it really looks haphazard at this point. And to take $32,000 of the city's money and invest it for him and for the person on the north that neither of them seem to be abiding by the permitted process. doesn't seem to make sense. And the other question I would have is, by doing this, I think it was commendable to say, if the state comes in with a really good bid and they can do this all at the same time, it seemed opportunistic. But at this price, where are we gonna run into this again, where residents are saying, hey, you paved a quarter of their street, why don't you pave a quarter of mine too? And I think we might be opening up Pandora's box on this.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilmember Greenberg.
in my limited experience in working with the county and how they do things,
This is state.
or states, they have their preferred contractors who work for them and have special permits and licensing and to work in that zone. I had to hire one for my own driveway and it was really expensive.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilmember Alders.
so a lot of the discussion around this was, it's a gravel road that goes onto a main highway, and when you pull out, there's huge potholes there. So does the 15-foot apron solve that problem?
I would say yes. You know, I guess,
If everybody's driving front-wheel drive.
Well, that was when we had that discussion, they're like, hey, now we're gonna have potentially all these cars, and it's like, it's already a problem today.
And part of the problem was,
So we're not responsible.
when 47 redid the road, they didn't put the apron in.
Right, so my question, if we think the apron solves the problem, are we trying to fix something that is gonna go away anyway? And if it's still an issue, I think Mary's got a valid point. If that's not the lowest bid, do we need to open it up to bids and figure out how we're gonna pay for this thing? And do the businesses pay a certain percentage and the residents on the road pay a certain percentage like the other projects? And we have a public hearing and we go through this thing like we would with a normal road project.
I think that's part of the problem we had is the person purchasing the property said if he had to pay for any part of the road, it would nix the deal. That was the impression we were given at the time.
So,
oh,
Mr.
right.
Oh,
Pardon me, go ahead.
Councilmember Blake.
Do we have an option not to do anything?
Absolutely.
Oh, okay. Just wondering.
So, Mr.
The
Mayor,
question was, if the state's coming in and they're gonna put in the apron, and since they've got the trucks and the equipment out there anyway.
Right.
Will
they
they
could
do
come in
this?
with-
I know, but we're saying it's too much, they want
And-
too much money.
And it looks like too much money, and it benefits, while the residents wouldn't have potholes where they pull out on the 47, you have two issues. One, you're benefiting two businesses, and they're not putting anything in. And two, you've got the issue that we have in some developments that don't go blacktop to blacktop. When you go blacktop to a gravel road, it's very hard to maintain that edge, plowing and grading. So it would move that off of 47, but it would give us a gravel road from there on back and benefit two businesses who are paying nothing for it. And it does seem to be a high number. We have nothing to compare it to. But at this point, if the state wants to go ahead and put in their apron, they put in the apron as legitimately they should. And unfortunately, this is the other issue with this, is the right-of-way on the north side of that intersection and the right-of-way on the south of that intersection are different depths. If they went to the furthest depth, we would be fine with cars pulling out on the 47. Unfortunately, they are choosing to go to the more shallow depth. They're going to the minimum if that's still what they're planning.
Well, right, because that's what they're governing, but if I may add too, the property owner on the south has a year to come into compliance. He is still working, he has open permits. And I will follow up on all those items. It should be noted that the property owner on the north has also done an extensive amount of cleanup there and has a new tenant in that building, there's far less traffic and virtually no outdoor storage. And I did verify that when the city approved that building, that the house was already there. So, the city approved that use knowing that the house was there. He still is.
To the north, you're saying?
Yes. So he still needs, he's working with the building official on coming into compliance and getting a certificate of occupancy, which the previous tenant, I guess, never,
On the
Allowed.
industrial building?
yes, on the industrial building.
So he's still living in the house?
So when, well, no, it's all changed because, so the son was living in the home with the mother, and he's now gone. So it's just the mother and the property owner. And then it's a little bit of a unique situation, but I believe that the new tenant is like a concrete, what do you call them with the directional?
Directional boring?
Not a boring, but they've got the trucks. with
pumper
the-
trucks?
The pipes, yeah, they pump the concrete,
Oh,
yeah. Anyway, so they're very close to having the CO there and getting everything back to where it should be. But yeah, you're right, this came up when the property to the south was talked about, and the residents did make it very clear that they were not willing to do this. But, you know, I think too, I agree with Commissioner or Councilmember Alder, that should either be all or none for a road like that. Doesn't make a lot of sense to do a half a cul-de-sac, to me at least, but.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilmember Alders.
how far is the apron going back, Liz?
Only to the edge of the right-of-way,
So which
Edge of
is,
the shallower right away.
the shallower one, which is only 33 feet from the center line, so I'm not,
does that even get it to the stop sign?
yeah, it'll
About
be,
the stop sign.
pardon me?
It was about the stop sign, if I remember right.
I thought I heard, Mr. Mayor,
Councilmember Greenberg?
Liz, I thought I heard you say 15 feet, what's that? Is that the length of the apron?
Well, we're thinking that it's from the edge of the paved road to where they go, right, to the edge of the right-of-way. So it's 33 from the center line.
So if you take a look at the picture on the second page.
Yeah.
I'm not sure how wide the drive lanes are there.
Just,
You can see how.
I mean, ours are 12, but,
The right-of-way on the north goes back twice as far or better than the right-of-way. And they're gonna go to the right-of-way on the south. So they're choosing the lesser of the two.
Right, so I was thinking a reason for the potholes would probably be when you pull up and you're about to leave and your back wheels are still in the dirt and you need to hop on, so you hit the gas and you're spinning out on the dirt and then you hit the pavement and you finally catch.
that's where I'm wondering, do we propose, I mean, 32,000 is a lot. If you go 20, it's 120 bucks a foot. Do you go 20 feet and it's 3,000 bucks, or 25 feet and it's 3,000 bucks and the problem goes away? Can we just, I mean,
Mr. Mayor,
Councilmember
I'm sorry, are you done, Jason?
Rainbow.
Okay. I would ask that council consider tabling this. Let's let the state get their apron in there. Let's see what it looks like, put it on staffs, the public works staff, to look at it. Once that apron is there, what do they need to do to that dirt road, and it's maintenance on it. I mean, I'm on a dirt road, there's maintenance on dirt roads, and it just needs to be put on the public works staff's watch list. But I'm not interested in spending $33,000 to benefit two businesses that don't want to put a penny into it.
I don't disagree with that.
Yeah, so I would move that we table it, once the state's apron gets in there, we go through a winter, because it's gonna be winter soon, sadly. And then again, put it on the staff's watch list to see what happens, and hopefully maybe that apron will take care of the problem. I don't know, but I don't wanna spend $33,000. of money to benefit two businesses.
Mr. Mayor?
Senator Stockman.
So you can table the idea, Ms. Greenfield, but we need to deny then the request for this, company to do it, just to be on record for Allied, and then I need to get back to them and just say, no, we're not gonna use you, just go about your apron.
All right, so I would amend my motion that we deny the bid presented by Allied Blacktop Company, and that we allow the state to put their apron in, and Public Works staff is directed to look at it and to take care of maintenance-wise what's needed there.
Thank you.
We have a motion. We have a second.
I second it.
We have a motion and a second. Motion by Councilmember Rainville, second by Councilmember Blake, to deny the request to pave that portion of the road for $32,303.
Okay.
Councilmember Alders, you were starting to go down the path of if they truly are so much per foot.
I mean, the problem is you're got a gravel road that you're going from 0 to 65, because that's a fast road. So we can say the city's gonna maintain it, but the problem is that one section of that gravel road is gonna need 5 times as much maintaining as the rest of the road, because there's only a few citizens that are on it. Once you, pulling in is no problem, it's pulling in, would be my guess. And I mean, I live on a gravel road too, but my gravel road, there isn't, or tar road that's in front of my place, people aren't humming past it I mean, this is a highway here, it's a state road. So that, maybe the apron will fix it since it's at an angle. That's why I was like, if you go back 20 feet, it's gonna solve the problem and we aren't gonna have to deal with it again, and it's $3,000, and that feels like a pretty reasonable amount not to hear about it anymore.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilmember Greenberg.
I would agree with his sentiments. I think as long as they're out there, and if it's true what he did with his math, we could at least ask them about a smaller amount. Liz, would that be possible? Could we ask them, well, that's kind of steep, could you maybe just do 20 feet with the apron?
I think I don't know if I can, yes. I don't know if they're gonna come back with a higher linear foot amount now.
Right.
Because that's gonna delay them further, and they've already been waiting over a month for us to,
Sure.
have our meeting, so.
Sure. Then the other option, of course, would be they put in the apron, we assess it, and then we say Valley Paving, can you go out there and put 20 feet?
Put 20 feet out there. I mean, I think those are our two options, right?
Because if it's at a slope and there's dirt, then it's gonna compound the problem we're talking about. No, there is no guarantee that it'll solve it completely. Wherever that cement edge hits the dirt,
Yeah.
I reckon there'll be something, but at least it won't have the heavy braking coming up to there, or they're peeling out.
Right.
I think that was what the concern was, if you're gonna have a lot of cars taken for test drive, and 65 is probably optimistic, going at least 65.
Right.
Yeah.
And at least this way they would be on tar when they hit the gas.
That's
I'm not quite sure the apron would solve that now. It's hard to tell by the,
I really wish that the state would go back to the further setback.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's true, that they're gonna delay, and if they come back and say, well, no, that was our price per foot if we're doing the whole thing, but
Yeah, now it could be double that, right?
yeah, you would think, you got the trucks, you're right here, we're not even asking you to do any base work,
We're
just,
trying to do the right thing.
it's commendable, but
well, should we drop the idea then and just wait till the apron's in and then assess it then? But my guess is it's just gonna be the way it was.
That's Mary's motion now, to assess it later.
that's the
That's the
motion.
motion on the table.
So if you wanna do something different, then vote accordingly. So we have a motion and a second. All those in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
Nay.
Aye.
All right, motion carries. All right. Ordinance 2021-02, grading, landscaping, erosion control, escrow.
Mayor and council, I brought this back after your direction last month. Made the recommended changes and clarifications between single-family new construction and single-family alterations, both of which are considered low-priority uses, and then all other uses which are high-priority uses. So the amounts are unchanged from last month. $200 inspection fee per lot for single-family new construction, and a $2,000 per lot escrow. And then I clarified the grading and landscaping escrow agreement to reflect those amounts. And then outlined the expectations in there so that included the construction site checklist, tailored that to our city from the example last month, which was from the city of Otsego. I spoke with Shane, and he had a couple other recommendations based on the MS4 changes that are coming forward. So you've got a 2-page construction site checklist.
Is that, excuse me, Liz, does that include Shane's recommendations?
It does, yes. So I've made note on there's 2 inspections, pre-construction and active construction, unless non-compliance requires additional staff visits. At such time, there would be, then you get into the escrow amount if you go beyond the 3 total inspections. And then the final inspection is at the end of the process. If you have any questions or like me to go through anything else in more detail, I'd be glad to do that.
Are we doing the washout? Anybody in Nowlan actually doing the washout for the concrete and the paint?
Now, it's not typical in a single-family construction, but it really should be, especially if you're disturbing an acre or more, because that's the threshold that takes it up to a new level as far as erosion control.
Mr. Mayor, what does the washout mean?
That means a defined area where the cement trucks wash out their debris, how
sure.
there's always a chunk
Yeah.
kind of left there. Or if someone rinses out a paint can or any other types of chemicals like
And
that.
the next page, they have the paint.
So they're supposed to be doing it a certain way. I mean, there's
So you're supposed to have
restrictions how the washout is being done.
you're supposed to have a designated area.
Okay,
And it's not quite as critical on a single-family home, just a single home. Like Brian's Bend most likely has an area,
okay.
but I just
If
put
they
that.
do, I didn't see it. I went through there today and there's nothing designated.
Okay, there's no sign or anything?
No,
And I don't know
one
for
house
certain.
is built and they're putting in all the utilities today.
Okay, and the second house is their model, I guess? The one on 47 is their model?
Just south of the development itself.
Yeah.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Rainville.
as far as the washouts, in all the years that I worked for a concrete company that did residential and small business, the trucks went back to the plant and washed out,
Oh,
so. I mean, if
Yeah,
you have-
you will see that in some cases where they wash out into a ditch. So I guess my question is, by including that in our packet, is that something that's informational? Is that something that we're looking to enforce? Is that? If I were to get this packet and I were to see that, how do I assume the city's responding to it?
I mostly put that in there for your informational purposes. What I would do is talk with Shane to see if he has any recommended method, or if it doesn't matter to him, or if there's some simple way we could, describe and show to our property owners and applicants.
I'm just thinking with the concept plans that suddenly started flooding in this last month, the potential for more Brian's Bends are popping up all over. So if this is something that we want to encourage or we want to enforce, I think we need to be clear so that there's no confusion.
Right.
A big part of what we're trying to do here is eliminate confusion, so everybody can look at it and say, I know what's expected of me, and I hit everything on the checklist, and, oh, what was that thing on the end there? I don't want them coming back later and saying, oh, I didn't know that, I thought it was just informational. If we're gonna enforce it, then it should be part of the checklist.
yeah.
Well, it will definitely be part of the MS4. It's already part of it now, but they're getting more stringent on inspections and such, so, we really should enforce it, and it's not that big a deal. I mean, there's examples of just, a cardboard frame with a plastic liner, that's not a big deal. And as Ms. Rangel stated, there are a lot of trucks that have almost like an internal washout system too, where they just do it and it's contained in the truck somehow. So it is on the first page of the list. If you saw it there, and then
Bottom one.
Mr. Mayor?
Councilmember Rainville.
As Ms. Stockman stated, it's the last one on the first page. And if we wanted to include the info from the Pollution Control Agency with the heading, information only, and you could do now these are not numbered, so somehow if you could reference back.
okay,
Yeah.
sure. We could entitle this just options for
Options for, yeah.
that washout
Yep.
site.
So that's a good point. One of the things that again, we're looking for clarity, and we found quite often in council discussions, whenever we can number things, it's easy to go back and say, on the checklist, construction site checklist, page 1, item 1 or A or whatever. I think if we can do that, it makes certainly discussion easier, especially if you're doing things on the phone or remotely.
Yeah.
Sure, okay.
And that way, if you can say, on this one, you can reference the information sheet back to page 1, item 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
Okay. Mr. Mayor?
Councilmember Rainville.
I would also like us, in going forward, is, again, to have pages numbered, also revision dates on these. So that
Absolutely.
we're all looking at the newest revision. I think we have different forms that have different things on them. If we have a revision date, we can
Yeah.
all, we're looking at revision July 13th, 2021. So everybody's on the same page if they're looking at something, whether they're pulling it up on the web or.
It's a pretty good list, Liz.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Good, I'm glad you feel it's
Understandable.
understandable. Okay, good.
Mr. Mayor?
Councilmember Rainville.
And again, the items being requested on this checklist, there's nothing out of the ordinary for somebody building a home, whether it be here, Oak Grove, St. Francis, South River, It's pretty stuff mandated pretty much by the state or in some cases our ordinances.
So, again, you modified this from Otsego, but again, it complies with our ordinances.
Right, so this would be the single-family and low-priority projects.
Mr. Mayor?
Councilmember Blake.
Liz, any required tree plantings have been installed at the proper size, height, and appear healthy. Do we need to say what is required in now then?
We don't require anything in the RRA district, but if you recall, when we amended the ordinance for our new district, the RRT, the 2-acre lot sizes.
Right.
We do have a tree planting policy.
Okay.
So then when Shane or I were to go out there, that would be required to be in typically before final grade and get it,
Okay. So, Mr. Mayor,
Councilmember Rainville.
to Councilmember Blake's question, then you have RRT district in parentheses? But should we say applicable only to the RRT?
Sure, that would be a good way to say it.
So, so somebody applies for a construction project, and they get this checklist?
Correct, so this would be a packet that they'd be given when they pick up their building permit. They would submit that, be an escrow at that time, and then the process starts. So once they get their silk fence and everything up, as is shown on the plans, so when we get to the next set of, the next checklist for subdivisions and single-family development, we're gonna start being a little more stringent on that the actual erosion control is shown on the plan, so everybody's clear then up front what has to be put in, and that we can verify that on site easier and compare that with the actual,
Good idea.
what's in the field.
So one of the things we discussed before was, as we came up with things, as we would do in business, have somebody try it out. So find people that are building and say, here's our new plan, and let's work the bugs out. See if we missed anything. So again, because sometimes we get wrapped up in trying to get motions approved and get meetings over with as they drag on. And sometimes we miss the details. We miss the forest for the trees here. So I think it's important that as we go through and say, okay, what else do we see in this? Then we throw it out there and say, okay, have somebody else look at it and say, does this cover what we intended to cover? Does this now make sense so that the applicant, the city staff, the inspectors are all on the same page? Really,
So
that's
who
what
are
we're
you
doing.
wanting to look at this? I'm confused a little bit.
Well, we had talked about it at a previous meeting that we would engage residents that are in the process.
Oh, okay.
So the residents that are actually doing it would give us feedback saying, yeah, this works, it's totally understandable.
Okay.
Or, I got lost here, you guys were following it, but I got lost. So I think one of the things to clarify, we talked about numbering each of the checklist items, page numbers, document numbers, revision level, and date. So when you refer to a document, we can say, construction site checklist is document XYZ, and we're rev level, whatever, and with the date. And then this would then be part of the packet that somebody would coming in would get. And they would know what's going to be looked for, and when the inspectors come out, they're gonna have the same thing.
Correct, and yeah, after the first, couple of projects, if there's something that needs to be tweaked, we'll bring that back to you, along with any comments that we receive.
So with this, if somebody was looking to build in now then, what might they be able to get so they can make a decision? This is where I want to go. This would be part of that. I mean, we're saying if we're going down here, they're paying an escrow already, but if they're investigating, how would they know what all is required of them?
So, I'm in the process of refining the other, kind of packets that we have, so there'd be single-family development, what you need to submit for your plan approval, and then we have separate informational sheets on accessory buildings, buildability, lot buildability, all the types of questions that I see should be written down, available, and given to them as part of, the initial
Intake
meeting, I guess.
Intake
Right.
meeting that we talked
Right.
about.
And
So,
Will there be a money,
again, one at a time here, so, Councilmember Blake.
Will there be some scheduling of the cost of all of these things too for them to look at? Or is that not,
Yes, we
it's
could-
comparable, they can want to compare from one city, do cities do that? Give you kind of an outline of what it might cost?
We could certainly do some type of a cover letter that would give them an idea. The building permits based on your value of your home. But the other fixed fees like the escrow and the grading, that could be definitely itemized. And so.
So I'm thinking, and in this day and age, most people are going online for things. They're gonna go online, if they have questions, they'll call the city. So it would seem to make sense to have a packet that says, if you're thinking about building it now, then here's the link.
Right.
Here's everything you need to know.
Right.
Because that's when they're comparing, okay, I'm gonna build in Elk River, or Oak Grove, or St. Francis, or,
Do the other
Ramsey.
cities have that?
I don't know.
Oh.
But I'm just saying, if I'm
Yeah, some
looking
do,
to,
some do.
if I'm looking to build, I wanna know what are my costs.
Yeah,
And the city should be able to have that online, and then obviously, then the packet goes with it. Okay, I've investigated, I can see what I'm getting myself into here, I wanna build now then. It's a little different here, because without sewer and water, we're not getting the large building companies coming in here, where this is what they do every day, all day. Individuals building, or smaller developments like we have in now then, they don't have somebody that's full-time job is to do the paperwork.
okay.
And one of the things we've been discussing is, the whole point of this is to avoid surprises. I want to know what it's going to cost me up front, and I want to know, and I think the checklist will get us there. Okay, we've identified what I'm going to have to do, and nobody's surprised at the end. So we come back and the inspector shows up, it's on this list, or we shouldn't be looking for it.
Mr. Mayor,
Planner, stop.
just a comment, when you said, people are comparing and looking online and calling, majority of people do that, but not everybody.
Oh, I understand.
So, you and I would do that or whatever, but once in a while, you get a call and say, yeah, I'm submitting for permit. Oh, so,
I was in the office recently and somebody called in and they were just, it seemed like hunting all over. They were asking about accessory buildings and this, that, and the other thing. It was like, hey, and what are you looking for? And advisedly they said, you need to call our planner. And because you're now getting into questions that, do you have a lot? Is this, you're just fishing, or are you just really looking at something in particular?
yeah.
Those particulars because we don't have something like this to refer them to online, you can go and here's the answer to those questions. Buildability, lot size and buildings, building placement, that could all be there online. It certainly make staff's job a lot easier and make it easier for residents to get the answers up front.
So, Mr. Mayor, what's the next step here? Where are we going?
So are we happy with this grading and escrow, at least for starters, and then maybe we try it out through the rest of the summer, because as fall arrives, then that's when Shane will have additional time to get involved with the high priority projects and any of the MS4 changes, additional changes coming through.
So on the grading and landscape escrow, will that not change with the MS4 that Shane's doing?
No.
So
Because
what
these
you're
are-
saying is, let's go with that, put that in place, practice on the other one, get it cleaned up as we talked about tonight. And then in the fall, we'll have the high priority to go with it and the MS4 changes.
Right.
And you'll mold that all into your intake package?
Right, and so this would be part of what people get, or we make this available in a packet form right in the front there in the bin
Or online?
and online, right?
Perfect.
Yeah.
I think
So
this
right
is
now, you're
nice,
looking for a motion on
very helpful.
ordinance
I'm never gonna
2021-02.
I'm sorry, Mr. Mayor, what did you say?
So right now, you're looking for a motion on ordinance 2021-02.
Correct.
On the escrow
And the accompanying documents, right?
document.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilmember Rainville.
I would move that we adopt proposed ordinance 2021-02 with the changes that we discussed, which was listing, numbering the items, page numbers, and revision dates. And the change to the tree planting ones where it's only applicable to the RRT district.
So are we going with the construction site checklist too, as part of that?
Yes, that would be critical to the property owner knowing what they have to do.
All right. So we have a motion by Councilmember Rainville.
Second.
We have a second by Councilmember Greenberg. Any other discussion?
Do we want to put a timeline for implementation so that it can get through the summer months as a pilot? And to be rolled out in fall with the intake forms and the checklists?
Well, I think the numbering and the page, I mean, some of those cleanup things certainly can be done right away.
Right.
And then I think, Liz, you talked about rolling it out now and then working the bugs out of it.
Yeah, I would like to try it on the next couple, and, I mean, by the time, we only get typically, what, a house a month, if that, so, if we try a couple before fall and then see how it goes, you know, give you any feedback on comments.
Perfect.
Okay.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? Seeing and hearing none, all those in favor of the motion, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed? Motion carries. Item E, interim moratorium on commercial development and resolution. All right, this is something I initiated, worked with Liz and Bob on. And part of the response was we've never got around to what we want our commercial districts to look like. You know, it seems like as you drive through small cities, whoever develops gets to decide what your main streets look like. And we haven't been meeting as an architectural review committee, and we've had some inquiries that would start to shape our downtown for us in our commercial districts without a firm understanding and communication of what that should look like. And so I'm requesting here a moratorium on developing those commercial areas until planning and zoning and council can come up with definition of architectural standards, criteria for commercial appearance and aesthetics. And that's what the resolution is, to put a moratorium on that for a year, not to exceed a year unless planning and zoning can't come up with something.
Mr. Mayor,
Planner Stockton.
this originally came up when we were talking about industrial storage facilities. So it came to a bit my surprise when we kind of switched it over to commercial. Now, I understand the concern because I sent the email regarding a request we had by Dollar General. And I want you all to know too that I do thoroughly understand what you would like to see in town here. And the first two questions out of my mouth to Dollar General were, have you ever done a building with different architecture, and are you willing to subdivide? And the answers to both of that were yes and yes. So I'm not completely oblivious to, your desires. But having said that, I'm not sure if, this, I guess where this came from other than that, because it doesn't include any industrial, and I'm wondering if it should, if we want to cover two birds with one stone, because if we're looking at architectural standards, we did have concerns as a council about the industrial areas, the color and some of the roof lines we had problems with, or blank walls. And maybe it's better off to do it kind of all as a unit, because we do have some industrial uses that are on our main roads, which would be more concerning visually than others. If you're in the center of the industrial park, it's a little different, and typically industrial building standards are lesser than commercial, and most often that is because they're not on the main roads. But
And I have no problem with that. The concern I have is we've talked about it repeatedly over the years, and buildings go up, and because we don't have the standards in place, and if we met as an architectural review committee, what standards would we be upholding? And so we don't have much right now that would keep the things that we might object to currently from happening again. And I know Mr. Rademacher has said multiple times, coming into Now Then was so much different than any other community he's gone into because we didn't have standards. He just could do whatever he wanted. And he says that's extremely rare. From all the places he's building buildings, they have architectural review and requirements, and he has to wrestle for everything. And he came in here and we just said, yeah, go build a building. And this was township days, and it was, to paraphrase, but it was very limited as to what we could even say as an architectural review committee. So I think establishing the standards, and if the council would like to broaden it to include industrial, I'm okay with that. I just want to make sure that those that are going onto our main streets have some sense of continuity, and we don't leave it just to whoever's building to say, here's what I want, and you guys stuck with it. Because that becomes your image of your town as well. So, and we do know that certain companies are less flexible. They want, this is their colorings and this is their style, and that's what they want to do. And if we don't have anything, I think typically in planning and zoning, if we don't have anything that says otherwise, they pretty much can do what they want in a permitted zone. So I think certainly on our main streets, certainly as it applies to commercial, and I think if we want to address industrial, we would have to just modify this accordingly.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilmember Greenberg.
Councilmember Elders, on the planning and zoning, how often did you guys give input into new commercial to suggest better looking exteriors quite often.
Similar to that, I think, this came up, I'm with Liz, I mean, this kind of hit me out of left field. What we talked about 2 months ago was, how many more storage buildings do we want in Nowland?
Yeah, that's what I thought we were
So,
doing.
this thing has, I thought that was the direction that we were gonna go with, so this has, in my opinion, nothing to do with that. So,
Well, it does, if you're allowing storage buildings, you can at least do architectural review on them and agree what earth tones are.
yeah,
But Mr. Mayor,
that discussion was, do
Yeah,
we want?
how
any
many
more
we
of them?
wanted.
How many do we want?
And-
That's why we said, let's put a moratorium on storage facilities past brand name. But, in planning and zoning, we did a lot of this, right? And come up, doesn't meet the current ordinances. And I don't disagree that if you go to Duluth, things look like a log cabin all the way through Duluth because that's the way they've got it set up, whether it's a Holiday gas station or a bank or whatever, and we don't have that. But so I'm not disagreeing, I'm just like, it feels like do we wanna, if we can do this fast, let's do it fast. If it's a year, that feels like a long time.
Typically, moratorium's gone for a year. If you can do it in less time, then that's great. It doesn't have to exist for a year. You can take it off anytime you're done with the work. But that's the standard issuance is for a year. And I think part of it is we can encourage people to do better, but if we don't have standards, they don't have to. We've been fortunate that MBI came in here with a beautiful building. We've got people that are coming in right now with some pretty impressive buildings. But if they chose not to, we don't have anything in our ordinance that says, we're limited as to what we can do on that. So as far as coordinating between properties, at one time, I think the bank thought when they came in here with the log cabin look is that would be the model for Main Street. So when the bar came in, and the assumption was, when Bill's came in and took over what was the existing superette there was assumptions they were gonna have to do what Holiday does in greater Minnesota, stone and wood. And because they were right next to the bank, that was the assumption. But we didn't have that, so we didn't require it. So this gives us an opportunity to establish those standards so that we can say this is what's required, as opposed to we're counting on your best efforts and your goodwill.
Help me with the process. Can I call up Bob Rupee and have him, direct him to draft this thing up and bring it to city council? Or does the city council say this is what we should do, and then we have Bob Rupee draft it up and we talk about it? Because it feels like we had the staff go after a moratorium on no more storage facilities, and we got a left field, hey, let's not do anything for the next year on a different commercial type.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilmember Rainville.
I see those as two separate things. If council has not taken any additional action on a moratorium for storage, then we should, if that's what we want, but we haven't. This is a separate issue altogether, brought forward by an inquiry by a business that I have yet to see any of those businesses look anything different than their model. And so this resolution and moratorium gives us an opportunity to determine what we want our city to look like. And we've had conversations and conversations and conversations on it. But I see them as two separate entities, so.
I agree, but Mr. Mayor should have come on a request for council action or something, I mean, instead of a resolution.
Well, I put it together as a request asking for legal opinion. Bob took it, ran it as a resolution, worked with Liz on it as far as the ordinance. And so, yes, I will say that it took on a life of its own because there were inquiries pending.
But it's still, I'm just asking, Mr. Mayor, should it have come a request for council action? Was that the proper way to do it?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, then we've got a problem, because all this being done without the council having any input is telling me that we're not working as five.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilmember Greenberg.
Planner Stockman, if we put a 1-year moratorium on commercial, how many new businesses wanting to come into Nowland would you guess would be affected?
Just commercial? Or commercial and industrial? The way it's drafted is just commercial.
Yeah, just commercial.
C1 district. I don't know, maybe 1 or 2 at the most, but there is a way to ask for an exception or within that moratorium, if they can prove that they're coming forward with a design and a architecture that's acceptable to the council. There is a way to grant that to someone, approval. But the bigger question is what's our goal here? And if it's architectural standards, I don't think they need to be as detailed as, some historic town like Excelsior or something.
Right.
But just some basics, we can take the buildings we like in town and say, okay, well, what do we like about them?
Yeah, good idea.
Right? And just some basics, and maybe we don't want, the one-way lean-to roofs, or maybe we, there is a fine line too between squelching someone's design abilities versus, requesting certain architecture. But I think it's doable in less than a year. It's a matter of who you want to do it also, and we have done that before. There are special architectural firms that do it too, but I think they would try to take it to a higher level, like an Excelsior that would be more costly. But yeah, you're not looking at a lot. I mean, it's hard to predict. We just opening up, or close to opening up, our new industrial area, which we get more requests for. But we do have this newly zoned commercial land too, right on Viking here. And we have to be careful. I mean, and are we interested in getting something going there? Maybe it's a situation where we, you instruct me how you want me to work with people that do inquire. But yes, it would be easier if we did have some sort of a manual or architectural handout to give people. Yeah.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilmember Greenberg.
Planner Stockman, so I think if we were to pass this, and if we got someone in the interim who wanted to put in a commercial entity, that you would just tell them, there's currently a moratorium. However, the council is open to listening to your request, and we examine it, and maybe 3-4 months from now we have a start on our architectural ideas, and we're able to sew that into the entity that wants to build here, and we're like, what, we're gonna make an exception, allow you in, but we've been making these hurdles, and we want you to,
Right.
I don't know, hurdles is a strong word, but we've been making these architectural guidelines, and we want to have that input into your structure. To a degree, we've been doing that already in planning and zoning.
Yeah.
Small degree, yes.
Yeah, small degree, right.
We have also got into earth tone colors is blue and white, which is the color of the water and the sky and clouds. And that's not everyone's definition of earth tone colors.
True.
So I'm.
Well, and that's the thing, if, we are the Architecture Review Committee, what standards would we tell people we're holding to?
Yeah,
And if we can't agree what earth tones are, then
yeah. And so I don't necessarily totally disagree with this. I disagree with the process because it feels like we directed the team to look at a moratorium on bulk storage. And Jeff went to somebody and come up with his own ordinance that we're looking at, which is not what we're supposed to do as a team. So we need to knock that off.
I didn't direct the ordinance.
So you didn't work with Jim Rupee to come up with this?
Liz came up with the ordinance.
And you didn't direct
No.
Liz to come up with this?
I didn't come up with the ordinance.
I didn't change any ordinance.
So who drafted this and who come up with this? Because we talked bulk
The
storage.
resolution, I said if I wanted a request before the council for a moratorium, what does it have to be? And Bob says you draft a resolution. And so it should have been attached to an RCA, but when Liz and Bob started talking, and she said, because Bob ran it by her, and she said, actually, it should be the whole commercial district. And in fact, it probably should be industrial district too. I never saw it after that. I expected it to come back and be part of an RCA. And so when I got the agenda, it's in here as part of the resolution, because I was expecting it to be, come through as a part of an RCA.
How could I do an RCA, Mr. Mayor, when you initiated it?
Exactly.
Well, and
That is
gotta own
that is
something
not
here.
how it works, and you know very well that you directed Attorney Rupee to prepare an ordinance and a resolution, because when he called me on Friday before the 4th of July weekend, it was in process.
I said, I need to know what I would need to do. Because you'd have to have a resolution. I was not cognizant of the ordinance. I know that he was talking with you, and then the ordinance came back, and you said you'd recommend it being the whole commercial district. Because my concern was, out of nowhere, we got a request for, right on Main Street, for a store that we couldn't provide any architectural standards to.
So
And Liz said, I asked them if they would be amenable to dividing and architectural review, architectural standards. But I don't have anything that we have.
Right. No, I agree. If there's nothing in the ordinance, it's hard to make it happen, but there are people that are willing to work with you. The point being is, when it first came about, we were trying to limit it to a certain parcel or property owner, and I thought that was very inappropriate, that it would be either all the districts or none.
Well, and it frustrates the hell out of me when
Councilmember Alders, you'd like to
we're
speak?
given somebody specific direction to do something without the council's knowledge of it. Because it could easily been discussed in here, and we could have made a motion that said, let's draft up an ordinance to put a moratorium on this, because we're having the discussion anyway. And that's the way it frickin' needs to work.
So the council should work. We all get on it.
Okay. Well, I made the mistake of asking what it would take, and it developed into this. Should have come through as an RCA, and that's what I was asking, what would it take? And
Gotcha.
It's a good idea.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilmember Greenberg.
legally, it kind of sounds like we have to draft it this way if we're going to be looking at certain entities building here, and if we want more of them, we kind of have to look at it as a whole. So I understand that language in here. It is kind of a start reading it, but if that's what it takes in order for us to limit certain entities from proliferating, then that's what we can do. And I like the option that they can still work through this moratorium, and still, if someone really wants to build, we can still work through the moratorium with that entity and get them what they desire. So,
And I'm not even seeing it as limiting certain entities. I'm saying how they appear, you know, how they function as far as, we don't even have, if you go into certain cities, their loading docks are facing their main street. you know, and take a look at this new school that just went in down the road, and they put all their, the attractive to the side, and they put all their loading docks and their industrial side to the highway. So we just don't have any standards. And the question was, if people are going to actually start moving into town and start building buildings, as an architecture review committee, we wouldn't even know what to tell them.
Mr.
So
Mayor.
that was my hope. was to
And
get-
so,
Councilmember Green.
Yeah, so the problem I see is, I think those standards can be so grandiose or, so detail orientated that it could go on for quite some time. So maybe a way to get halfway there is, one of the methods that we use here, and that is to examine other cities and their guidelines for architecture. Maybe that would get us halfway there. Cause I think it's gonna be a long haul to put all these in for us to all hash this out and to agree on this. I think it's gonna be a long haul.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilmember Blake.
so is this saying that once we get our standards in place, that if someone comes in and wants to put in a building and they agree to our standards, we can accept that?
We can vote on it, yes.
Huh?
Yes, we would vote on it.
Yeah.
So we're not limiting anybody. We're not saying, or are we gonna do that too? That only certain kinds of businesses can come in here?
No,
No.
Mr.
No.
Mayor.
No.
Okay,
You
that's
can't
just what I was
legally-
wondering.
You legally cannot do that.
Okay,
You
No,
can't
if-
say
if
I
they're
don't.
allowed businesses, that's what our zoning districts are set up for.
okay,
We
Yeah.
have limitations if you have an industrial and you're in a commercial,
yeah,
but we don't say what type of business.
Okay.
We don't say what brand of business.
Okay.
We say what you're doing for a business,
Your uses,
your
right?
uses.
okay, that's what I
We can
just was
respect.
wondering.
And Mr. Mayor,
Councilmember Rainville.
and it may be as simple, you know, Joel is worried about time frame and details, maybe as simple as looking at the bank, looking at the Northwoods building, looking at the old banquet center building and say, what do we like on that? That looks like now then.
Or this gray building, I don't, what is company is that nice gray?
MBI.
MBI right here.
What are they, was it over here?
Yeah.
What are they?
They do, commercial or, septic and sewer stuff.
You're
for-
kidding,
for
that beautiful
like-
building?
Yeah, like,
Plants, water treatment.
no, they also do that though, MBI
What do
does
they do?
water treatment stuff. So on
Water
big-
treatment, everybody
yeah,
asks me about
yeah.
that.
But looking at the couple examples we have right now, the CST, what do we like in that? And start that, we don't have
And
to
if you
start from
have main
scratch.
streets you've gone through towns and say,
I
really
like
don't
that.
like that, I really like that.
Yeah.
I mean, just drive Viking out to 35 and say, really like that, really don't like that.
Well, a lot of
I don't
people
think
like
it-
the one over here. I've heard a lot of comments
Yep.
on how nice that
It's
is.
very nice.
Mr. Mayor.
Plan of Stockton.
It can get somewhat, it is hard, because one thing leads to another. For instance, you get into, sort of the look of the boulevard, right? The tree planting plays into it, the placement of the parking lots play into it, you know, which way the delivery doors faces play, you know, all these different things. So in that sense, you know, I think it's.
But we're not reinventing the wheel here, because this work has been done, and there are communities that have done it well, and they're saying, here's the things, before the developers come in and say, this is what's most convenient for me, you go ahead and say, yes, we care about delivery doors, we care about parking lots, we care about trees, and because we found that even, you know, when the new restaurant built, you know, we didn't have standards there, we didn't have anything to go back to them. We didn't even have setbacks that we could adhere to at the time. So it was an opportunity before developers came in and said, we've got money here, we'll set up your town for you the way that works for us. I just wanted the council and planning and zoning to have a shot at it.
Yeah.
So ideally, it would have come through an RCA saying, if you like it, here's a sample resolution.
So are we thinking it needs to be industrial and commercial? Because we're gonna see more industrial buildings
Yes.
versus commercial over the next year. And originally we talked storage buildings, is that in here as well? Would that be under industrial?
Well, right.
Or is that a specific line item? Because we said, do we even want another storage facility if it came in? Because we're at capacity.
Right.
So one of the questions that's come up along that line is, at one point, there was a discussion when we were feuding with the bars. So when the bar originally went in, there was concern about the regulars at the existing bar, that people are going to put each other out of business. And how many bars do you want? Do you want Blacktop and bars from the edge of town to the edge of town? And one of the things that came up at the time, like the storage units, you can limit the number, you can limit the location, you can limit the separation. So you can do the same thing with bars, restaurants, whatever you start to see a lot of, you can say, we can accept it in town, but just not one after another, like you might see in certain neighboring states. So I don't know from an architectural standpoint if that covers more storage units, more restaurants or bars, if that's a separate discussion. I think from what Liz was saying, though, if you're going to say commercial, and because industrial can be on a main drag, you may want to have architectural standards on industrial on the main drag as well. Because otherwise, as you look out your window, there's nothing we have right now. We're very limited in not repeating that.
So, Mr. Mayor,
Councilmember Rainville.
I would move that we move this resolution, adopting interim ordinance enacting a moratorium on new industrial and commercial development in all industrial and commercial zoning districts pending the study of possible legislative action.
We have a motion by Councilmember Rainville. Do we have a second? I will second so we can discuss. So Liz, you're recommending that if we do this, your recommendation would be to include industrial.
I would recommend doing it as a unit, yes, and then you can revisit, do we still like 50% metal on industrial buildings? You know, there was, when this kind of concept, there are new products now that we need to consider. You know, some of the cement board stuff that is looks so much like wood you can't even tell. I mean, some of these really should be considered a higher grade material, you know, than they are. And something especially like these insulated panels. Yeah, so I think we should probably do it as a unit.
So I know when originally when A&B Welding came in, the vision for the industrial park at the time was all tip-ups. And that became prohibitive. People didn't want to move to Nowland with no sewer and water and have to put up tip-ups.
What, I'm sorry, what are tip-ups? I'm sorry.
Concrete slabs. So A&B Welding is a prefab concrete wall, and they come out on trucks and they tip them up into place.
Oh, okay,
So
okay.
if they add on to
Oh,
their
yeah.
buildings, they'll be putting more tip-ups.
Okay, I get it.
And their understanding when they built was everybody in their industrial park would have that. Town board decided that wasn't cost effective, and so they went to lesser standards. But originally, everything was going to be concrete tip-up buildings.
That'd have been nice.
And I think that even though A&B wouldn't have to, if they expand, that's what they'll continue to
You
do.
don't like them?
But we didn't require anybody else in town to do that after that.
Well, it should look
Mr.
better
Mayor.
than that blue
Planner Stockton.
monstrosity that we
There-
have.
Have one conversation at a time here, please.
We do have a really kind of a nice niche here too in attracting more startup type businesses. And if we get too fancy schmancy, we're gonna scare them away because part of the reason they come here is, well, A, smaller lots, and B, that we don't have as stringent of standards as like Ramsey or something. But, I mean, part of that is our rural roads, for instance, our ditches and not curbs and some of those other things, but
And tax.
anyway, we can take it all into consideration.
So the development,
Councilmember Alders.
the development that we just discussed a few weeks back, down the road here at the corner, is that part of the moratorium and he can't build now?
He ironically had, let me know that he's on hold for about 6 months anyway, because his material costs went up. Yeah, Mr. Curtis, so, I mean.
I'm gonna speculate that if we're gonna put a moratorium on, this would be the time to do it, because a lot of people are reevaluating because of material cost.
Oh, yeah.
But, Mr. Mayor,
Planner Stockman,
the other thing is, if he is building like the building he has on Iguana, which we like, then he can request this waiver and come forward anyway, so.
I think what it does is requires us to understand what we're looking for and specify that. Because I think, again, what we ended up with out on 47 with the car lot, well, he's got a year to put it all in place. So far, what I've seen doesn't look like the architectural standards we were hoping for in our main drag.
Tell you, the one I look at every time I leave my driveway is not the architectural standards I was looking for.
Well, and this is, this is our learning opportunity, you know, how do we avoid that again? Because,
So,
Well, Mr. Mayor, I mean, with all due respect to him, I mean, considering what was there and the reuse of the site, I mean, it's a very difficult site to develop a higher and best use there, so, I mean, he's kind of dealing with what he's got, but at any rate, he's not done there, so I don't get too.
Mr. Mayor,
yeah,
Councilmember Greenberg.
I think if we're gonna pass this, we should at least pursue the original intent, which was, are we gonna limit storage units and their number and capacity? Another one would be to find a like-sized city. I don't know who's gonna do this, but find a like-sized city who has standards that we like, and we grab their standards and look at it and have it like as well, at least we have something. If all of a sudden we get a bunch of industrial people who are like, hey, it just so happens to be this is the year that we build, and we get 5 entities wanting to build during our moratorium, at least we have something in place. I like the idea of, you know, there's a few businesses here in town that I really like. One is with the old truck with the, you know, out by you.
Yep.
One is this one right across here. And if we just at least have a picture and say, I know this is kind of vague, but this is what we really like.
and this is what we don't.
Can you have your architecture before you get going, have your architect start with these kind of ideas?
Well, I think that as Planner Stockman was saying, though, that part of this package is, it's not just the appearance of the building, though that's an important part of it, but it's the setback, it's the trees, the parking lot, the access, you know, where's the front of the building? You know, if your loading dock is on 22.
And that's why I say this could go on for a long time, because it's not as simple as the building front and the trees and the bushes. Now it's where's your loading dock? Now how high is that fence? Now where is that brick?
Well, but I
So
think
it
those
gets
those
really-
standards exist.
It get really detailed. So maybe we can find someone who has a set that we can go by. I just have a fear that this is
You
gonna
did
go on and on. So if we can get there quickly by it, looking at other people's standards, I'm all for that.
Mr. Mayor,
Is
it possible?
Councilmember Blake.
Is it possible to put any, if we make a new standard, is it possible that maybe we can enforce it on existing places? No, that's not it. We
Only
can't
if they
that?
do a renovation,
They renovate, yeah.
a major
So like
renovation.
if we can't, if there's a lot of junk all over, we can't enforce that we put some type of fencing or something to block the view of that, but that if you don't do it in the beginning, when you give them their permits, then it's over, huh? I'm just asking.
Well, if somebody were to come forward with an addition or a change to the site, and I might know who you're thinking of, but, yes, then you have every opportunity
Okay,
to bring them into compliance.
okay, just wondering.
And outdoor storage is never grandfathered in, by the way. Buildings are grandfathered in. What's sitting out in your yard? No, that's not grandfathered in.
Okay,
So we can always enforce our ordinance and say, hide your stuff.
okay. Once we have it,
Yeah.
but we don't, okay.
Which actually, that's some of our IUPs in the past and CUPs, that was the whole purpose of it. Build a building and stick your stuff indoors.
Are dirt and gravel piles considered outdoor storage?
Yeah,
What about manure piles?
Yeah.
Don't have those. Mine are hidden. Can we include
Councilmember Alders.
Joel's suggestion on, are we going to have the moratorium on storage facilities or not? That was the original thing that passed in the council.
the limit of them, limiting them.
Well,
right?
Mary had a motion for both C1 and I1, which would limit all of our business districts. Seconded by Pelon, so then
So they would fall in there,
that would
as
fall within
automatically
that.
be part of the moratorium.
You know, I think we probably will need a separate moratorium on that. Architecturally, this would cover it. But whether you can
Quantity
put
would.
16 more up is, if it's a permitted use. And there is more land.
So do we want to direct the team to come up with a ordinance that puts a moratorium on the additional quantities of storage facilities?
So along that lines then, what we could do is direct staff to contact Rupi and say we would like a moratorium on storage units so we can study how many we want and where we want them, if that's what we're looking at.
So is that just an action item? Because we already passed that moratorium.
We
So
have
is
them-
that just an action item that needs to get taken care of?
I believe that would be covered. If you've got a moratorium where you're not allowing any I1 uses at all, that gives you time to amend your ordinance. And we can do that.
If that covers it.
I will double check.
Why would that be any different for somebody to come back with an exception that says, if I use what you guys consider to be earth tones, can I build one?
Yeah, that's, I don't know about that.
Well, true. I mean, you could get somebody that would ask for a waiver,
So somebody.
Yeah,
but you don't have to approve a waiver from your
No.
moratorium.
no, but I'm just saying that to Councilmember Alders, they can come in and say, architecturally, I'll agree. I'll say this is earth tones, this is whatever you want me to say, I'll say, but I want more buildings like this. And I think that the two separate issues are, we're looking at architectural standards in the two districts, but we're not really talking about more or where of the storage units.
I like this.
And I think that if previously we had directed to inquire what was going on, I don't know if we ever directed a moratorium on them, I think we should, as a separate issue, vote to request a moratorium and have staff work that out with the attorney. Because then we know it's covered separately from the architectural. This covers the architectural, and then we get going on that so that if people do come in, we've got standards that we as a review committee have something we can go by.
Okay.
Okay,
All right, so we have a motion and a second. Any other discussion on the architectural review resolution?
Mary's motion was amended to include industrial, is that right?
Correct.
Correct.
Seeing and hearing none, all those in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Now, if you'd like to put a motion through on the other two,
Well, I mean, we have one out there. We passed a motion to
On
put a
that.
moratorium on
we
stove.
already did that last time.
did we do a moratorium? I know there was an
This is
investigation.
investigation.
There was direction to work with Attorney Rupi on getting the moratorium.
Okay.
But in my opinion, this covers it. if we can list in here what our goals are for the moratorium, we can certainly include the number, location, and separation of various uses. So you're still allowing yourself room here to amend your ordinance. Either way.
Okay, so you're saying the number, so we say we're satisfied with the number of storage units we have here in town, so we amend our ordinance accordingly.
So I'm saying you can, if you would rather have it specify architectural standards, the number of types of uses, right? And the location of those uses and their separation. Those can be part of your ordinance amendments as part of this whole moratorium. Because you don't have to approve any now for a whole year, right? So,
Yeah, as long as number and types of uses and separation can be covered.
so why don't we just, I guess it's too late to amend your
Yeah, we
motion.
already voted on it.
Did we vote on it?
Yeah, we did.
We did.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilman Rainville.
I would, just to keep things clear, I think we should
Separate motion.
redirect Liz to continue with the direction that we gave her to bring back a moratorium in regards to like businesses.
Okay.
And
So
then we have two
separation,
That's
Number
one we
like this.
gave her last time,
Right.
last month.
So let's get back on that track.
Okay.
so is that direction clear then?
So this one passed,
So this
and
is,
we'll bring another one back
Yeah.
next month.
this is more architectural
This
standards.
is architectural.
The one we would like you to bring back is how many like businesses, Mary's got a good terminology there, do we want in a certain distance from each other?
And separation, yeah.
Right, location, separation, number, yep, okay,
And
got it.
Churches can be having 6 blocks.
And Mr. Mayor,
Councilmember Rainville.
I don't know if it's directed specifically to storage units, it's anything. Any like business.
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we're not signaling out,
You're
singling
right, I
out.
was giving,
Oh,
I
we
told you,
just brought that up.
how many
This is
churches
not
can we
Northeast
have?
Minneapolis, we got a liquor store and a bar right next door to each other on each corner, and a church.
And a church.
Yeah.
Well, they need all three.
Yes, they do.
Go from one to the other to the next. You decide which way you wanna go.
So, Mr. Mayor,
Councilmember
it
Rainville.
is
Wine.
10 o'clock. I would ask for council's consideration to table F and G under planning and zoning, and quickly ask the mayor to explain the city financial newsletter, because that's time sensitive based on the newsletter, the fall newsletter.
All right, so again, as I have relatives in other cities and I,
But is that
oh, I'm sorry. So yes, is the council amenable to
yeah, doing that?
tabling F and G?
We don't need to have these finished for any specific time?
No.
One of them you just got.
They're
tonight.
important,
With
not
those
urgent.
people sitting here for
Because
this?
it's 10 o'clock.
So,
Okay.
a motion to table F and G. I'll second that. And motion to table are not debatable, so.
I'll take this. Yeah, okay.
All right, so financial newsletter, just a quick background is when I go to visit relatives, I'm always looking at what their cities are doing for fire recruitment and a variety of things. And my mother-in-law happened to hand me this thing. And I thought it was pretty valuable, pretty helpful in understanding how tax money's broken out. And last year, with the fall newsletter, we talked about doing a pie chart so people could see where their taxes are going, because it's always an interesting thing, because people think we're getting all that money. And,
That was good.
so that was our discussion a year ago. I would like to include that, and there's a couple of items I put on here in particular. And as I said in the RCA, open it up to anything else the council would think would be appropriate. But I think if we can take a look at how we compare to other communities in Anoka County, tax rate comparison is generally how you compare your community to other communities. Residential property tax distribution and commercial property tax distribution, if you take a look on page 4E, the last page, I think this is something that the businesses had some eye openings on. Residential property tax in the city of Plymouth, of every dollar that comes in, they get 22 cents. School district gets 40 cents, county gets 31 cents, and other entities get 7.
Where is this?
Right down here.
No.
So it's a nice graphic that says, here's what's happening. The commercial property tax is even more telling. For every dollar of commercial property tax, Plymouth gets 10 cents. State gets 22, county 15, school district 18, and they're part of fiscal disparities, which they explain in the newsletter if you want to know about fiscal disparities. But I think it's important because when one of the businesses a number of years ago confronted me on his $33,000 tax bill, and he came back and apologized, and he said, you guys aren't even getting 10% of that. He realized less than $3,000 was coming to us, and the rest was going to state, county, and school. And so I think that's a valuable graphic to have, how we compare to other municipalities in Anoka County. And then the pie chart on what does come to us, that 20% or 10%, whatever it is. Again, on page 4, there's a pie chart that says, here's how we're breaking it out as a city. And so those 4 from this example, I thought were valuable in communicating what we're doing with tax money. First of all, we're not getting it all. So when you see this, I think it's important for people to realize if you really want to affect your taxes, go to your school board meetings, because that's where the lion's share is going. And the county's taking it, and we're getting a small portion of it. Because I do think people are confused that we're getting everything that they're taxed, even if they don't say it out loud. And then how we're distributing it. Most places, public safety is the majority of their budget. Right now, depending on how it goes with the sheriff and with the fire department, that's been a smaller part of our budget. But
So, Mr. Mayor,
Councilmember Alders.
so the ask is you want those 3 things added?
I would like 4 things. Tax rate compared to other municipalities in Anoka County. Residential property tax dollar distribution, commercial property tax dollar distribution, and a pie chart on those taxes that actually do come in and out, then how we're breaking them out percentage-wise. So that's the ask. And then that what I had in the RCA was anything else that, if you were reading through that you thought might be helpful.
Lori, is that doable or no?
Unfortunately, not for the fall newsletter. I can't get all that done. The tax comparisons for other cities takes hours and hours of time. It's a big task. I can do a portion of it, yes, and I plan on doing some information in the newsletter about the taxes.
So what do you think you could do?
I think I could do the residential property tax distribution and the commercial property tax distribution, and then the city services supported by the tax levy, because we're working on the budget right now. But the other items are going to take a great length of time, and we only have until July 23rd is the deadline for the
Those would be
newsletter.
really valuable, and they're easy to read.
Yeah, I think when you get too much information, like the example, you lose your audience. And the things that I can put in there will be very beneficial.
Good.
Again, I do think the way they broke out the residential and commercial property tax distribution with the dollar guide,
Yeah.
that's a nice graphic.
Yeah.
And if that's doable, and the services supported by tax levy is doable, certainly that, I thought right now that we had just seen, I just saw something online on the tax rate by municipalities in Anoka County, but if that's difficult, I'll take 3 out of the 4.
Perfect, let's roll.
Yeah.
Mr. Mayor.
All right. So, a motion to accept the RCA amended to delete the tax rate comparison, if that's difficult to do.
We're doing residential, commercial, and support services by tax levy. And Lori, you can make that happen?
I will make that happen.
All right.
I would second that then.
I have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Hey,
Aye.
discussion.
Discussion?
No.
Whoa, Greenberg's pulling up.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilmember Greenberg.
Lori, can we see a mock-up of the newsletter before you go to print?
Well, Mayor and Council, in the past, that used to happen in the office, but we are on deadlines. We get the information out. We get all the articles and newsletters to the designer. They put it all together with us, and then it has to go to the printer. And unfortunately, when it gets sent out to council, it delays the process considerably, and we don't get it out on time.
Do you see the proof before it goes to press?
Absolutely.
So,
Trust Lori.
to the point is this last one,
Pictures of the farm.
something happened in the last one where the pictures didn't turn out.
Yeah, so that's why I bring it up.
Well, sometimes it's the artwork that we receive. There's a lot of times people are they're sending artwork that isn't compatible with what we're trying to do. Are you speaking of the items that you sent in?
Yeah, I sent them via Dropbox, which is typically a platform that us printers use with each other. So I thought they would be able to download that.
Yeah,
They couldn't.
no.
A simple email or phone call to
Yeah.
me, regarding that would have, I think, would
Well,
have solved it.
I
Because
did
I
talk
work
to you,
with
and then you
vendors.
resent them to me in a different format, and then that ended up working. Sorry, Mary, what did you say? I didn't hear what you're saying.
One person at a time,
Paul's
so,
the floor.
Right, so if I would have seen the proof, I would at least been able to catch that, and then I could have resolved the issue, because I saw, once it was printed, obviously there was an issue. But if there was an issue, we could just, communicate, I guess. Did you send a link on to them? The
I sent
Dropbox
them-
link?
Yeah, I tried to send that, and we couldn't open that. So then the next item that you sent worked out just fine. I didn't see any problems. When I saw the proof, I thought it looked fine, so.
Did you see the final print?
Yeah,
Okay, so I could tell by the final print that someone pulled up the images on the screen and then took a picture with their cell phone, which I had a good smirk at that at first, because digital to digital, anyway. But if that's not possible, if we can't see the newsletter, if the timelines are too tight, I guess I understand that. But,
well, we can certainly plan for that in the future. We will have to back it up a couple weeks then. Right now, the timeline we're on is, we receive it on this date, it goes to the printer, or it goes to the designer, then it goes to the printer, and then it goes out into the mail. But if we're going to have council approve in the future, we'll back it up another 2 weeks and have the deadline sooner.
are we still using the same printer
No.
that we always have?
Mhm.
It's a different one?
Yes.
Okay.
so at 23rd is the deadline. What's the published date?
I'd have to look on the calendar, I have all that, I don't have it in front of me.
And so having the council look at it, you're saying adds 2 weeks, and
Typically,
So, Mr. Mayor,
Councilmember Raymond?
can I suggest that when Lori sends out a proof to us, we're given 2 days to look at it, and if you don't look at it, then you're approving it. When things come out open-ended, you think you got forever to look at it, and that isn't always the case.
Silence is acceptance.
Yeah, so if you got 2
I
days.
kind of like that idea. Do you
Yeah.
think that would be amiable? Do you think that would be workable?
I think that's fine.
We have a deadline of
Yeah.
2 days, you gotta get your revisions in, and be mostly to catch things. I know the mayor had something on the last newsletter as well. He could have caught his thingy, I could have caught my thingy, and hopefully in 2 days, we could have quickly resolved it. Because I know I'm guilty of this too, of pushing Lori right to the edge, and then expecting, big.
I wish that I would have heard, I have not heard a thing about anything wrong with the last newsletter, so I need to know this information moving forward, otherwise they may just continue, I think they're fine, and
Yeah, so
not hearing feedback.
Right, so by having multiple eyes looking at the newsletter, at least we can catch our perspective areas of expertise or interest, I guess. So I like that idea of 2 days. If you haven't responded in 2 days, it's going to print.
All your graphic standards are.
He had some nice pictures and they didn't quite turn out.
Yeah. Yeah, I had comments from people whose barns were featured and they were not happy.
I have not heard any of this.
Well,
I don't understand why.
Well, people don't always
Well,
think of calling city
that's part of
offices.
the, how do we improve our communication? So we need to make sure we have good give and take, so. I had one other thing for good of the council because it's time sensitive
Was there a
also.
motion on the table? Yes, there's a motion and
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
said
Jeff
I
and
wanted.
Mary.
You want a discussion.
So I think we should.
You
That's right.
hijacked us.
All right, so we got the 2-day review period. So all those in favor of adding the financial data to the newsletter, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Had one other thing, because it's time sensitive, there's an August deadline before our next meeting. They moved the mayor's annual conference to September. It's normally in April, and it's in St. Joseph this year. And since they didn't have the one last year, I'd like to go back to that. Total cost with conference, overnight stay, and mileage would be about $350.
Wow.
Do it.
I would move that we approve the mayor to attend the mayor's conference with expenditures not to exceed $375, just in case.
I second it.
All right, any discussion? Seeing and hearing none, all those in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
And I move to adjourn.
Second.
We are adjourned.